Welcome to the Happy Lady channel. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Lindsey Reach, also known as the Happy Lady. Welcome to a 3-part series where we're really going to break down the who, what, when, and why of what is happening right now in the world on a global scale. Instead of pointing out all of the crazy headlines we see all around us every day and looking for patterns, we're going to go deeper in this series. Now, back in 2019, I released a similar 3-part series, and 7 years later, in 2026, I've realized it's time to take it to the next level. I will have a link down below if you want to check out that past video series called Hold to the Rod. In part 1, which is this video, we're going to start with a quick history lesson that bypasses all public education and institutional history books. We're going to hear straight from the mouths of researchers, scholars, bloodline descendants, and modern-day descendants of the biblical group of people who are found at the center of this conversation. In part 2, we're going to deep dive into their handbook of beliefs and practices, which reveals the universal blueprint that unites all of these groups and societies. You might be surprised at what we uncover. And after diving as deep as we can get, it does get pretty dark down there. In part 3, we're going to bring the light, the hope. We'll be meeting people who left that world behind after discovering a greater power and a greater light that finally filled that void they had been so desperate to fill their entire life. If you want to follow this series, be sure to subscribe right now to the Happy Lady channel if you're not already subscribed, and be sure to like this video. Now, without any further delay, let's get into it. Part 1. A couple weeks ago, I began to ponder this man right here, Napoleon Bonaparte, Emperor of the French Empire, conqueror of Europe, and reformer of modern civil law. Now, I don't remember much about Napoleon, but I do remember American movies and history books painting him as a tyrant. Now, if there's anything that history teaches us, it's that history is written by the victors and their financiers. So, let's take a look at Napoleon. Who financed his strategies and who came out the victor?
Well, one of his primary reasons for selling the land of the Louisiana Purchase to Thomas Jefferson and the United States was because he knew that it would turn the United States into a superpower that would defeat his mortal enemy in Great Britain. I don't know if you were ever taught that during history class of the Louisiana Purchase. If you have a flat, navigable waterway that bifurcates the entire country, that you can protect your shipments and make it to an ocean, you geographically become a superpower.
As it happens, Barings Bank, a British bank, funded the American purchase of Louisiana, which is much bigger than people think.
Napoleon, he took over the throne, and he's not of old blood privilege. Napoleon was a man of the people. That's what makes him so admirable. He brought an end to the Inquisition in Spain. He brought equality to Jewish people, freedom of religion, freedom of the press. It'd be amazing to imagine, like, what could Europe have been had he still remained in power and not been deposed of at Waterloo.
To the Jewish communities of Europe, Napoleon's promises of freedom seemed almost messianic. For centuries, life for the Jews had been unbearably oppressive due to anti-Semitic legislation. Jews were restricted in terms of where they could live, which occupations they could practice, and where they could travel. They were unable to own land. Oppressive taxes were imposed upon them, and expulsion orders and pogroms were commonplace. Napoleon offered the Jews of France, the Netherlands, Western Germany, and Italy the first intimations of modernity. With full civic and economic rights, Jews now had the opportunity to participate freely in public and political life. The walls of the ghettos of Europe fell, and the Jews could walk out free.
Allied coalition propaganda has spread many lies about him both during the war and after his defeat, and very few are aware of the true reasons as to why he and many men of different nations and classes faithfully fought for his cause.
Napoleon Bonaparte said about Jesus is crazy. Listen to this. So he said that, "I know man, and I tell you, Jesus Christ was not a man. Alexander, Caesar, Charlemagne, and myself founded empires. But on what did we rest the creations of our genius? Upon sheer force. Jesus Christ alone founded his empire on love, and that this hour millions of men would die for him."
He believed that Jews should be integrated into French society as equal citizens, rather than treated as a separate legal community. This policy led many European Jews to view him favorably. By the early 1800s, complaints from some regions about Jewish money lending and debt disputes led him to adopt more restrictive measures.
This revelation is what sets off Napoleon's counter-revolutionary conquest.
So British Prime Minister William Pitt tried to build a European coalition against Napoleon, using diplomacy and gold. Britain would prove Napoleon's most steadfast enemy, and its press delighted in relentless mockery of the French Emperor. Britain and France were old rivals, in Europe and overseas. But now, Pitt feared Napoleon's conquests had made France too powerful. Pitt found willing allies in Europe, among monarchs who despised Napoleon as a product of the French Revolution and a dangerous threat to the existing order.
Napoleon sends agents to infiltrate and spy on Masonic lodges. Shortly thereafter, Napoleon recognizes Freemasonry as a threat to all of Europe. Bonaparte was guilty of nothing more than becoming a threat to Judeo-Masonic Britain's divide and rule doctrine, aptly named balance of powers. Recognizing the Masonic infiltration of both royalists and revolutionaries, Napoleon will now partake in a crusade to conquer and purge Europe of all Freemasonry. In response to complaints about Jewish moneylenders, Napoleon had, in 1806, suspended all debts owed to them. In 1808, he goes a step further and issues a decree that the moneylenders refer to as the infamous decree. Napoleon wants the Jews to move away from their traditional moneylending practices and become farmers and craftsmen instead. His decree severely restricts the practice of moneylending and annuls all debts owed by married women, minors, and soldiers. Any loans that had an interest rate exceeding 10% is also annulled. Napoleon's religious tolerance is admired by many of the Jews, but his efforts to regulate usury upset the Jewish moneylenders and sealed his fate. That is why, to this day, they refer to Napoleon's decree as the infamous decree. The Rothschilds of Europe must destroy Napoleon before his anti-debt monetary philosophy can take hold in Europe.
Napoleon maintained his loyalty to the Catholic Church, but had this to say about the Jesuits. The Jesuits are a military organization, not a religious order. Their chief is a general of an army, not the mere father abbot of a monastery. And the aim of this organization is power. Power in its most despotic exercise, absolute power, universal power, power to control the world by the volition of a single man.
And the Jesuits are crypto Jews. Right, you get a lot of these people out there saying, it's the Jews, it's the Jews, it's the Jews, right? There is a Jewish mafia, and no one is allowed to talk about them. They are probably more powerful than anyone else on earth, right? The point I'm getting at is that I believe the Jesuits are even worse.
They work directly under the Pope. They're not under the authority of the Vatican. They're directly accountable to the Pope himself.
Let's try this again. This time with this man, Julius Caesar, imperator of the Roman legions, and also a conqueror and reformer.
You have the dictatorship, which is supposed to be held for 6 months, and Sulla holds it for 4 years. Oh, by the way, and he holds proscriptions to kill anybody that he doesn't like in the Senate or is against him. That's the world that Julius Caesar walks into. And you have somebody like Pompey that holds his consulship well before the age of 35, which he wasn't supposed to do. So this is the world he walks into that's very broken. And when he actually tries to confront things, the ones he's confronting run away. So I think we do need to bring a better reputation for Julius Caesar. He's, definitely killed some people. That's not okay, but he's not the bad guy in other ways we've been led to believe he is.
what really upset the Senate oligarchs was not Caesar's accumulation of power, but how he used the power. Like other populares before him, he attempted to deal with unemployment, he attempted to deal with poverty, he attempted to deal with unfair taxes, he attempted to deal with debt relief, land redistribution, and aristocratic greed. And those were unforgivable things.
When Caesar took power, it wasn't hard to see that the Roman democracy was already an illusion and had been for some time. Elections were bought through lavish feasts, gladiatorial games, and direct cash handouts to citizens in exchange for votes. The voting system was rigged by class. The wealthy voted first, and their votes carried significantly more weight than the poor. If a politician tried to pass a law that the elite disliked, the Senate would hire street gangs to beat, intimidate, or assassinate voters at the ballot boxes. Caesar realized that the voting system was broken, it was hypocritical, and used by the elite to keep themselves in power under the guise of democracy. But instead of fixing the voting system, Caesar replaced it. Because he didn't trust anyone, he decided that the people would be better off with one absolute ruler who looked out for their well-being, rather than a corrupt Senate that allowed them to vote but starve in the streets. In Rome, the aristocrats were known as the Optimates. When Caesar was first elected to the highest office in Rome, these Optimates tried to strip his position of all real power. They attempted to assign him to manage forests and cattle tracts instead of wealthy provinces. And when he tried to pass a popular law to give land to the poor citizens and army veterans, the Optimates used religious omens and filibusters to block it. Outraged by this, Caesar bypassed the Senate entirely, taking the law directly to the public assembly for a vote, which permanently shattered his relationship with the conservative elite. I think it's safe to say that Caesar was annoyed by these elite and all of their privilege, all of the corruption. He had to have known that cutting back their privileges and giving to the poor and the veterans was absolutely going to tick them off. While serving as the governor of Gaul, Caesar enjoyed legal immunity, so the Optimates made it clear that the moment his term ended and he became a private citizen, they would prosecute him in court for the aggressive tactics he used during his consulship. Conviction would mean financial ruin and permanent exile, so to survive politically and personally, Caesar needed to transition directly from his governorship into a second consulship, which the Optimates fiercely refused to allow. These Optimates believed that they were defending the traditional Roman Republic and preserving power within a small elite circle of aristocratic families. But Caesar's perspective was that these Optimates were seen as an oligarchy of greedy, short-sighted politicians who were paralyzing the empire. Caesar aligned himself with the populars, realizing that the path to absolute power meant aligning himself with the common people and his loyal soldiers. When he found himself at a crossroads of having to choose between bowing down to the Optimates or fighting them, Caesar chose to march his armies across the Rubicon River in 49 BC, sparking the civil war that ultimately destroyed the faction. A year prior to this, the Optimates in the Senate passed a decree demanding that Caesar lay down his command and disband his armies immediately, while allowing his chief rival to keep his troops. Caesar offered a compromise in which he and his rival would simultaneously disarm their troops. However, the Optimates rejected this entirely and declared Caesar public enemy number one. Here's where we start to see a lot of similarities with Caesar and Napoleon. So I did some research into who funded Julius Caesar. It was a billionaire by the name of Marcus Crassus, and he didn't fund Julius Caesar out of generosity. He did it as a cold, calculated political investment for 3 reasons. First, he needed a political weapon. He was the wealthiest man in Rome, but he lacked the raw popularity and charisma of his chief rival, Pompey the Great. Crassus saw the young, wildly popular, and ruthless Caesar as the perfect political tool to use against Pompey. At the time, Caesar was deeply in debt and his creditors had blocked him. So Crassus took advantage of the opportunity and funded his alliance, which consisted of himself. He was the source of the money, Pompey, the military power, and Caesar, the political brains and popularity, to successfully, completely bypass the Senate. This is nothing new. We see these tactics used today in politics, and it wasn't hard for Caesar to grow his allies because they all shared a hatred for his rival, Pompey the Great. Here's where we see the patterns, the similarities between him and Napoleon. So Julius Caesar began to gain favor of the Jewish people. During a battle in Egypt, a Jewish army saved Caesar's life when they breached Egyptian defenses to rescue him. Years earlier, the Roman general Pompey had brutally invaded Jerusalem, massacred thousands of Jews, and desecrated the Holy of Holies in the temple. When Caesar fought a civil war against Pompey, Jewish populations throughout the Mediterranean wholeheartedly backed Caesar. When Caesar got into power, he increased the Senate membership from 600 to 900. And during this process, he packed the Senate with loyalists, provincials, and soldiers. By doing this, he diluted the bloodlines, the elite. Then he stripped financial monopolies by reforming tax collection to stop governors from plundering provinces. Then he passed land reforms. He redistributed public land to the poor and to the veterans. And then he centralized judicial power. He took the control of the courts away from the elite monopolies. And then he permanently removed the elite's ability to rotate power by declaring himself dictator for life, where previously dictators or the Caesars of Rome were only meant to be in power for 6 months, as it was an emergency measure to be used during a time of crisis. Well, he didn't just stop there. Caesar exempted Jewish citizens from mandatory military service so they would not have to violate the Sabbath. He lowered taxes and allowed the destroyed walls of Jerusalem to be rebuilt. He granted them full freedom of worship and the unique right to collect money to send back to the temple in Jerusalem. So this money didn't go towards the Roman Empire, it went to Jerusalem. Now, where this differs from Napoleon is that Napoleon didn't want the Jewish people to be seen as a separate class of citizens. He wanted to immerse them fully into European society as European citizens, meaning they would not have special privileges. However, Caesar was granting the Jewish people these special privileges. They didn't have to serve in the military. Any money that they earned, the taxes went to another nation. Clearly, this would have ruffled some feathers, but it absolutely worked out in Caesar's favor. That is, until he was violently and brutally assassinated publicly on the Senate floor by those in his inner circle. It was a premeditated assassination in which he was stabbed 23 times to ensure that everyone would share equal blame. His body was then burned on an altar, which is why many people today speculate that this was a planned ritual. There was no grand burial or tomb. Instead, today, there is a monument that marks this spot. A small marker for the man who was known as the most powerful leader of Rome. Caesar's closest friends, who were true friends and loyal to his cause, they were very upset by his assassination and took justice into their own hands by killing every person who helped assassinate Julius Caesar. Spearheading this justice was Mark Antony and Augustus Octavius, with Augustus being the heir to the throne, being Julius Caesar's nephew. And Augustus gaining power over Rome was exactly what the Senate was trying to avoid through Julius Caesar's assassination. However, it backfired, and Augustus did gain power over Rome. He became the first official emperor of Rome in 27 BC. And it's believed that when the Roman Empire fell around the 5th century, that the Roman Senate evolved into the cardinals of today's Roman Catholic Church.
Rome has dominated Europe First of all, obviously, under the Caesars of Rome. And when the Caesars of Rome fell at about the 5th century, a new power rose in Rome called the Vatican. Well, the Vatican simply took over the position of Caesar of Rome. And so today, the papacy or the Pope is still basically Caesar in Rome. And this is why all of the nations of Europe all come to bow down to the Pope in Rome, because he is, in point of fact, Caesar. His official title is Pontifex Maximus.
They are the Maxima. They hold most of the power.
That was a term that was given to Caesar of Rome. So the point I'm making here is that for 3,200 years, Rome has dominated Europe. And for 3,200 years, Europe has dominated the world. Therefore, there is the old saying that all roads lead to Rome.
Because there's two different structures. There's the structure in the Catholic Church where you have the local parish priest is like a private. Then they have a Monsignor in some of the parishes who is like a corporal. Then they have the assistant bishops who are like the first officers. You have a lieutenant. Then you have the bishops that are like captains. You have the archbishops that are like colonels. Then you have the general officers that are the cardinals. And then you have the conclave of the cardinals that come all together. That is like a major cabinet, if you will, for the Pope. And so that there's a whole military structure to that order, but the Jesuits are not involved in that. They're professionals. That they're lawyers and doctors and scientists and diplomats and other trainings that they have. Their PhDs.
My father wore a yarmulke in the house at all times, and so did I, and so did my brother. And we would sit there every Christmas Eve and watch the Mass, the Christmas Mass from the Vatican. I remember as a kid thinking, I said to my parents, look, the Pope is Jewish too, because he was wearing a yarmulke. Anyway, why did we watch it? And it's to my parents' great credit that we did. They were religious Jews who loved the fact that Christians celebrated their religion.
The very first Pope was a Jew. And if you look at their hats, they have Star of Rumphens on them, which they call the Star of David.
The first symbol that I want to talk about is the headdress that the Pope or the Bishop of Rome wears. That symbol goes back at least 5,000 years. This strange and interesting headdress that the Pope wears is impacted by a god named Dagon. Dagon was a fish god. We have a god who's half fish and half man. So now we see the Pope's headdress, but when turned, you then see he's actually wearing a fish head, because he's representing the worship of an ancient Phoenician god. And that very powerful mystical god is still dominating the spirit and the intellectual thinking of religion even to today.
And here is a famous painting from the Middle Ages of the priest of Dagon officiating in a hospital. And here are the priests wearing a fish headdress.
During the Renaissance period, the Medici and Borgia popes belonged to powerful billionaire banking and political dynasties and are said to have literally bought the papal elections to plant their own family members, such as Pope Alexander VI and Pope Leo X, to control the church's vast global wealth and armies. It's also been said that during the 10th century, for about 60 years, a wealthy, corrupt Roman aristocratic family led by a noblewoman named Theodora and her daughter Marozia completely controlled the papacy. They successfully planted their own sons, lovers, and puppets onto the papal throne to secure the family's wealth and political dominance over Rome. We see this same playbook in modern-day Babylon.
Epstein isn't the only Epstein.
That's like late in the game guy.
Yeah.
You know? And I know most people think that's super high level. That's still mid-level in the world of families. He's not the family man in the same way, right? You can run into a different synagogue of Satan everywhere you turn, right? You can run into the great whore of Babylon that sits in Rome and Vatican City all over the place. But then there's these old bloodlines too that are a completely different thing. And they have different ways of controlling people. And information and secrets is what my family trafficked in predominantly. And so my parents on one side, they had a great Christian front in everything they did. But inside, that's where business happened. You know, and it's because they're split personality people. One side is wholly given over to this and the other side is wholly given over to something else. And so that's what I was raised in. And it was as normal as breathing.
Are you seeing the pattern, the common denominator? Okay, now let's dive into some family history to see these pieces really come together.
You will never see the Pope without these family members in the background. Pallavicini, Orsini, Farnese, Borgia, Borghese, Aldobrandini. If you punch in Google Islam and then Pallavicini family, you will see who is running Islam. It's a Roman Empire, Italian, Persian family called Pallavicini. And when you break that word down, it means those who are close to Allah. They run everything. Their names are not their real names. Those are corporate names. Queen Elizabeth, she is an Orsini. But when you look at her lineage, you will see many other names. Well, those are corporations which come under the Maximum family, which is the Orsini family. They are the Maxima. They hold most of the power.
Would you claim that the Orsini family are more powerful than the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers?
The Rothschilds are Orsini.
Yeah, but didn't the Rothschilds change their name from Bauer originally?
Yeah, that's true. Bauer is another corporate name. Remember, your surname is a corporate name, which is copyrighted by the Vatican.
All of the organizational structures around the world, the secret societies is probably the largest one as it interconnects with other types of organizations, but it's the easiest way to understand how it works with the royales at the top, beginning with the 13 families in the West, not around the world, 13 families in the West. There's probably another 13 families around the world. And the 33 families underneath and the Committee of 300 families, with the Rosicrucians as that intersection between the purebloods and the rising lower bloodlines that come up through Freemasonry, Illuminati, into the Rosicrucians' bottom half as part of that thelemic tree trunk.
Who and what is the Committee of 300? Well, I've dealt with that. I've told you this is a supranational body that knows no boundaries, respects the laws of no countries. The first time that they were publicly announced was by a German socialist by the name of Walter Rathenau. Now, I'll give you some background of Walter Rathenau. He was the financial advisor to the Kaiser of Germany, and he was also the financial advisor to the Rothschilds, the French family Rothschilds. So he must have known what he's talking about. He made an astonishing statement in 1934. He said, "There is a committee of 300 men that rule the world. They are known only to each other, and nothing happens without their consent."
Is there a hierarchy for these things, like Illuminati, Freemasons, etc.?
Yeah, I gave it to you, but I'll start from the bottom. Freemasonry at the bottom, Illuminati, Rosicrucian, Committee of 300 families, Council of 33 families, 13 families. Intersects into, there'd be, I'm not sure how many families out of the 13 that are part of the worldwide one, but they are well represented.
European Jews enter into certain secret societies like the OTO, Golden Dawn Society, and a whole bunch of Rosicrucians and stuff, and they go in and they get the secrets for the Jewish, for Israel. See, the Jews have an oath that they take as a young child. Whatever group they get in, whatever secret society that they get in, that the Israeli oath as a Jew overrides all other oaths, and as a result, they got to give up whatever kind of secrets that they got from these other secret societies. So it's a big, nasty war going down.
I came across this quite by accident when I was serving in Africa, in Angola, and I was given a series of documents which were only supposed to be handed in to top-level people. They were what we call above the top level of classification of intelligence documents, and there I discovered that whilst I thought I was in Africa fighting against the invasion of the communists, I was in fact fighting to introduce socialist regimes in the black African countries, and that I was actually working for a committee called the Committee of 300, also known in intelligence circles as the Olympians.
His name is Dr. John Coleman, and he frames this as a 25-year-old investigation shaped by intelligence-level access.
In 1986, I wrote a work called Mind Control, Metaphysics, Extremely Low Frequency Radiation and Weather Modifications. And in that work, July the 8th, 1986, I said that the top-level intelligence organization in the United States was the National Reconnaissance Office, far bigger than the CIA and any of the other intelligence agencies. And by the way, we have about 10 different ones in the United States. I even had the audacity to give the address of this organization. 3 weeks ago, Mr. Sam Donaldson, the gentleman who wears that beautiful toupee so effectively, he came on with a program in prime time, and he said, this is one of the biggest scoops that ABC has ever had. And he told about the National Reconnaissance Organization. The exact same thing that I published 8 years earlier. I tell you this to set the stage so that you'll understand I do have some experience and that I know that of which I speak.
He's planting a marker in time, 1986. And he says he named the organization before the public was even supposed to know it existed. Because once you understand that layer exists, you stop thinking intelligence is just spies in meetings. It's reach, it's visibility, it's who gets to see the world first and who reacts second.
Here is a list of those 13 families. Feel free to pause the video to read through the list. Here are the 33 families that operate under the 13 families, and it's broken down into 4 areas. So first you have the political and intelligence dynasties, and I will just go ahead and read their names. Under U.S. political and oil dynasty, you have the Bush family. For U.S. political sphere, the Clinton family. For U.S. political and resource sphere, the Gore family. The historic U.S. political and legal dynasty is the Taft family. The railroad, finance, and diplomacy family is the Harriman family. And then the architects of the modern CIA and intelligence state is the Dulles family, spelled D-U-L-L-E-S. Then down under banking and industrial titans, you have the historic German Jewish banking family, the Warburg family. The Wall Street and international finance family, which is the Schiff family. You might recognize a lot of these names in modern politics. Next, you have the associated with historic Kuhn, Loeb & Co. banking firm, which is the Kuhn family. Then the Wall Street investment banking family, which is the Loeb family. And international asset management and financial advisory is the Lazard family. Interesting how that name sounds like lizard. And this is funny too, because in conspiracy circles, they talk a lot about lizard and reptilian entities that take on the identities of these financial advisors and bankers. I don't know too much about that. I don't get into that, but I'm sure you've heard of it too. That's where it comes from. And interesting that in French, the word for lizard sounds exactly like Lazard. And Lazard or Lazard is a French surname. Then you have the Mellon or Milan family, which is over aluminum, banking, and industrial wealth. And then last in this category, you have the Vanderbilt family, which is over historic shipping and railroad empires. On to the third division, which is the European royalty and aristocracy category. You have the House of Windsor. Well, we all know who they are. They are the reigning British royal family. Then you have the House of Orange-Nassau, which is a Dutch royal family. Then you have the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, which is historically linked to multiple European thrones. Then you have the House of Habsburg, which is an ancient ruling family of the Holy Roman Empire. Then you have the Radziwill or Radziwill family, which are of high-ranking Polish-Lithuanian nobility. And then you have the Thurn and Taxis family, or Taxis family. They are German nobility historically, controlling Europe's postal system. And last in that category, you have the Savoy family, the historic royal house of Italy. And in the fourth group, which is the last group, this covers media, corporate, and occult branches, starting with the Oppenheimer family. I'm sure that name sounds very familiar. They are over diamond and mining monopolies. Next, you have the Sassoon family. They are historically a wealthy merchant and banking dynasty in Baghdad and Britain. Then you have the Disney family. This one always breaks my heart, makes me sad, Our family is related to Walt Disney, and we have so many fond memories of Disneyland. Some of our best memories are from that amusement park. And yes, I've done videos in the past all about this. So very interesting, but this Disney line goes way back. It's not necessarily recent Disney. It didn't start there. It goes way back. They are a French family. And no surprise, this family is over controlling mass entertainment and psychological programming. We've had a lot of whistleblowers coming forward recently talking all about this. And I want to say, as with all of these organizations, businesses, and companies, the everyday people working there are not a part of any of this. This is way above them. It's very top level. And one more thing I want to add to that is it has pretty much infiltrated every business, every corporation, every industry. So if you wanted to completely avoid all of this, you would have to boycott and avoid pretty much every business, company, and industry in modern day Babylon, which means you would have to live inside a glass bubble. And as members of the church, we are commissioned to spread the gospel to the four corners of the earth, which means we live in the world, but we don't have to align our hearts with the world. We don't have to be of the world, but it's simply not possible to live inside a glass bubble and carry out the greatest work of these last days. Next family is the Hearst family, and they are over mass media and newspaper monopolies. After that, you have the Rhodes family. They are associated with Cecil Rhodes, African Mining, and the Round Table Networks. Then you have the McDonald family, and they are tied to specific corporations and networks. I don't think I have to say much there. Next is the Sinclair family. They are historically tied to Scottish nobility and the Knights Templar. Then you have the Bruce family. No surprise there, they are of Scottish royal history. Then comes the Stuart family, and they are of British and Scottish royal history. Next you have the Cavendish family. They are the Dukes of Devonshire and British aristocracy. Then you have the Spencer family, and they are of high-ranking British nobility. Last, we have the Montgomery family, and they are a historic British military family with aristocratic lineage. Now, you might recognize some of these surnames in your own family tree. I certainly do. But just like we can't live in a glass bubble, we also can't change our family tree. Now, these 300 families, the Council of 300 that operate under these 33 families, they spread across a variety of secret societies. So here are the main ones you often hear about. I have this up on the screen. You're welcome to pause it to read each description. But the remainder of this video is going to focus on one particular group up on the screen. And that is because this particular group is always coming up in the headlines. It's as though they want to be in the spotlight. They want you to know. But I want to remind everyone that they are a political movement. This is not about ethnicity or race or even religion. It is about a political movement. And remember, even though they play a large role in events going on right now in the headlines and have for many, many years, they are not at the top. So it's important to understand this hierarchy because oftentimes the names and the groups that we do hear about that are in the headlines, that are out in the open, they are not the ones at the top. They answer to someone. They are the puppets for a darker agenda. But of course, there's definitely benefits in it for them. They see it as a win-win for themselves and a win for those that they answer to. So let's continue on.
But my mother's side are extreme Catholics and Jesuits through and through. And so her father ran a different operation in Southern California, which was much more based on the child exploitation side of the equation. And he operated out of Lake Havasu City, Arizona. Lake Havasu, for those of you that are unfamiliar, sits in the absolute desert border of Arizona and California, and it has the Colorado River that's been dammed up, and they created an artificial lake there. And it was a secret military base back in World War II. It was called Site 6. And it was a stopover point crossing the desert for soldiers going there. And they would made it into a rest and recuperation area. And so it was a party city from its foundation. It had a lot of underground structures that were built into it as a refueling point. And in the 1960s, a guy named Robert P. McCulloch bought it. And he bought it and he also purchased the London Bridge that crossed the River Thames, and he had it shipped over here stone by stone. And while they were doing that, they excavated 80 bodies that were entombed inside it in a practice that's called annulment, where you would sacrifice a person and bury them alive in the walls of the foundation. And so there's all these chambers in this facility of the London Bridge where they would do torture and all kinds of ritual stuff. But this is why the sing-song nursery rhyme, the London Bridge is falling down, falling down. That's a nursery rhyme to talk about how you have to give your children over to the government so you can hold up the London Bridge. And they would literally take their children. This is in the history book of the museum at Lake Havasu City. You can see these bodies of these children that were sacrificed inside the walls of that space. So he bought that as a charged object. He bought that as a portal mechanism. And they built in Lake Havasu City with another designer from the Disneyland. And they literally built a pleasure island. That's what it was facilitated for. And they designed it so that it would be a retirement community that would facilitate the exploitation of children. And that's exclusively what that city was founded and built for. And so the original founders of that operated out of the Knights of Columbus predominantly as a wing of the Jesuits. And that's the business down there. It's an industry to cover up child abuse. You got a bunch of old men running around with little boys, and everybody thinks they're grandchildren and nephews and nieces and all that rest. And so all along that area down there is where I would be taken from my earliest days and shattered, abused, traumatized, systemically so. But it's for behavioral modifications purposes. That's the end goal of the abuse, is to shatter your willingness to resist and to break your will. And once they own you and you have been woefully convinced you can never get out, you give in. And that's what happened. I became the person who I was died, and the person they wanted me to become was what was born out of that disgusting phoenix ashes,
Wow. The best example to understand the bloodlines, Europe, let's look at World War I. This was an interfamily war. So the King of England and the King of Spain and the Kaiser in Germany, the Emperor of Austria, the Tsar in Moscow, and all the Belgium, they're all cousins. They all intermarried to keep those bloodlines as ennobled and as pure as possible. And it was an interfamily squabble.
And it's the same people. They were the popes of Rome. They built the Etruscan Empire, which was in Italy. Then they built the Roman Empire and razed that. Then they built the Habsburg Empire, although there is no longer an emperor or a Kaiser. The Holy Roman Emperor no longer is on a throne. But the infrastructure, the social and political connections, the principles, the template for that Habsburg Empire has very, very ancient roots, and that is still the power center.
Here is another man that the history books did not paint so favorably. He was a little bit before my time, but even I remember the narrative that my teachers and all the adults in my life spoke about him and his character.
The centralized control is the only time that I can remember that Hitler came into our consciousness, because I remember I made the point that centralized control of an economy could lead to centralized control politically of a country. If you have dictatorship for an economy, it will lead to political dictatorship as well. Or putting it another way, economic dictatorship can lead to political dictatorship, and that's what's happened in Germany. And we don't want it to happen here.
You see, the Bible makes a distinction, Mr. President, between two groups of Jews. One is called the synagogue of Satan. In other words, they are energized by a supernatural power called the devil. This is what the Bible teaches, whether you believe it or don't believe it. This is the biblical teaching, and this is what I believe. And I believe that they have a strange brilliance about them. They're smart, and they are energized, in my judgment, by a supernatural power. They have a stranglehold on Germany, on the banking of Germany, on everything in Germany. And they had the whole thing, you see. And, of course, Hitler didn't, but he went about it wrong. But this stranglehold has got to be broken, or this country is going to go down the drain.
What do you think goes through Andropov's mind, or what is his reasoning when he sits in the Kremlin and considers the problem of Jewish dissidents in the Soviet Union today?
Well, we have to understand first that there is a lot of anti-Semitism in the Soviet Union, even though some of the earliest leaders of the Marxist Society were Jewish. And some of the earliest participants in the Soviet hierarchy were Jewish. I remember, for example, Brezhnev telling me on one occasion, I thought it was rather interesting, we were talking about the problem of Jewish immigration, and he was complaining about the Jackson-Vanik Amendment. And he turned to me and grabbed my arm. He was very physical. He was always grabbing people like Lyndon Johnson did. And he grabbed my arm and he said, "Let me tell you, Mr. President, as far as the Jews are concerned, let them all go out and let God go with them." I think he was more interested, incidentally, in getting God out of the Soviet Union than the Jews. As far as Jewish immigration is concerned, we'll be reasonable on it, but he's going to use that somewhat as a card for things that he wants. And let me say that that's the way international politics is played. It shouldn't be that way. After all, as a matter of right and a matter of decency, he should let out the Jews, the Pentecostals, and others. But these people don't play that way. They do nothing unless they're going to get something in return.
What world powers are in her hands to be used in this final chess game for the takeover of the world? We can get some idea when we look back to the Council of Trent in the 1540s through the 1560s. At that time, and during those years, we find vows that were taken by these secret orders to take over the education of the Protestants, take over their schools, take over their churches, especially to destroy the Protestant Bible by creating many translations, destroy the monarchies of Europe, destroy nationalism, to use astronomy and astrology to create new calendars that would eventually transfer the sanctity from Sabbath or Saturday to Sunday. Their goal was to take over the business world, internationalism. They were to take over banking, to take over Judaism and the movement of Zionism, to create political strife and chaos and all of these things for one end, that Catholicism should rule.
Are the dissidents, and particularly the Jewish dissidents, are they doing the right things, agitating in the right way?
I think calling attention to the discrimination against them is correct, yes. I think as far as legislation is concerned, where a president, for example, says, I insist that you engage in a policy which will allow more immigration, as far as that is concerned, where it's done as a government, that's one thing. Where it's done as individuals, that's something else again.
Whether we like it or not, everybody thinks of you as conservative, and then when you lean a little bit in that direction toward the sociological thing is the big thing. What's that? It's all right in that direction. You have to, or the whole thing will be closed to you. You know, I mean, I don't care how conservative. I'm sure I'm more conservative than you are. At least you told me that one time, and I think that's true. But I have to lean a little bit. You know, I go and I keep friends with Mr. Rosenthal at the New York Times and people of that sort, you know. And not all the Jews, but a lot of the Jews are great friends of mine. They swarm around me and they're friendly to me because they know that I'm friendly to Israel. But they don't know how I really feel about what they're doing to this country. And I have no power, no way to handle them. But I would stand up if you know, under proper circumstances.
The fact is that American Jews support Israel, and I understood that. And the fact is that every Jewish prime minister that I have known has enlisted American Jews to bring as much pressure as possible in the political process on American presidents. That's understandable. I don't object to it. Now, a president must not go along with it on occasion. Let me explain something about what is called the Jewish lobby in this country. Because of what happened in World War II, because of the Holocaust, Jews, understandably in the United States, are going to put first priority on the survival of Israel. Now, as good Americans as they are, they believe that America's survival and security is directly related to Israel's. In other words, their belief is that being for Israel first means that does not mean you're putting America second, because they think it goes together. An American president, however, has to approach it in a different way, in my opinion. He's got always to think first of what is best for America, and that's true whether it has to do with the Israelis or whether it has to do with the Irish or the Germans or what have you, or the Poles, etc. Usually what is best for America is also best for Israel and vice versa. But on occasions, an American president must make a decision that does not, in effect, give the Israelis a blank check.
A ruling class will forgive anything except if you just tiptoe on their interests and smudge the edge of their interests one bit. That's what they don't forgive.
I decided early on in our administration that we were going to seek good relations with Egypt, others of Israel's neighbors. Many of my Israeli friends didn't like that because they wanted a special relationship with Israel and Israel only. But I have always said that Israel's interests are better served to have the United States a friend of Israel's neighbors and potential enemies than to leave a vacuum which the Soviet Union would fill. I still believe that, and I think that should be American policy today.
The entities that created the Jesuits during the Renaissance in Italy, it was none other than Alessandro Farnese, a Persian from ancient Persia. His family came eventually to Italy, and they founded the first 10 Etruscan cities in Italy. And when those were razed, they destroyed them, and they created the Roman Empire. The Romans, the Etruscans, the Holy Roman Empire, they're all Iranians, they're all Persians, it's all Persian blood. Italians are Iranians. Their practices, their beliefs, their food, their clothing attire. The Pope, for instance, wears a papal tiara dome, the papal dome, which is called the papal tiara. Well, that's what men in charge of tribes in Central Asia wear. They wear those very large domed hats. And then the red slippers that the Pope wears, those are Central Asian slippers. Romania was named for the Roman soldiers. The Iranian equestrian nomadic fighters, warriors, were brought to Romania, to Eastern Europe, and they were the soldiers for the Roman Empire. You see this fingerprint of Iranian DNA everywhere.
Aryan came from Iranian. That's the
right.
synonym. So
that's right.
It has migrated down into our most recent history, the history of World War II,
yes.
Global Depression.
Yes.
So what I'm hearing from you is that this extensive history that goes back millennia, right?
Yeah, thousands of years.
Thousands of years.
Yes. 14,000 years ago, DNA studies of a particular Iranian tribe indicate there was a mutation in the DNA, and it caused different extremes of albinoism. So the most extreme expression is red hair and blue eyes, light blue eyes. And then more moderate expressions are blonde hair, green eyes, hazel eyes, gray eyes. You see a lot.
Well, this reminds me of this video that I put out in 2022 called The Mysterious History of Red Hair and Rh-Negative Blood. I will have a link down below in the video description if you want to check that out, but it's one of the most popular videos on my channel with almost 500,000 views. I highly recommend it.
Aristocratic freedom is not meant to serve a popular ruler or a democratic constitution. It's meant to serve no ruler except the aristocrats themselves. And when they were talking about freedom, they're talking about their freedom to do what they want unaccountably to any other social groups. Aristocratic freedom is the freedom to maintain one's own enormous class privileges, to enjoy every prerogative of power and wealth without restraint. It was, and it still is to this day, antithetical to popular democracy. Aristocratic freedom continues to be pursued today by corporate elites with their MAI, GATT, and NAFTA, the aristocracy of international global finance, to devise means of giving them power that is unaccountable to popular sovereignty.
You know, this is very ironic because, I never thought that I would get anyone that had the nerve to join me on a broadcast like this live. Everybody, a lot of people who have studied banking and economics, they know that the Federal Reserve Banking Corporation is a private Jewish bank. Is this true?
Well, yes and no.
Well, what part is yes?
Well, it's a banking institution, that's for sure.
The 7 Jew banking families that took over control of the money in America in 1913 was the Rothschilds of London, Israel Schiff of Italy, Kuhn&Loeb of Germany, the Warburgs of Hamburg, Lehman Brothers of New York, Goldman Sachs of New York, and the Rockefellers of New York. A lot of people, they don't realize and know that these 7 Jewish families actually control all the money and have controlled the money in this country since 1913. I know you're aware of this.
Of course. The Goyim are the schleppers. You know, they do all the work. That's what they want to do. They want to work. They always want jobs, so we give them jobs to work. The Jews don't work.
Rabbi Finkelstein, a goyim is any person who isn't a Jew. A goyim is classified as cattle or an animal. Is this correct?
We're the chosen people.
Well, what are the synagogues teaching the Jews in America today as to the course of where this country is heading?
Well, it's like this. You know, America, it served its purpose for us for a while. We made a lot of shekels here. We made a lot of interest off the shekels. But we can get cheaper labor in China. We can get cheaper labor in India. Why should we pay the white race goyim here in America any money when we can make a better deal over there? It's all about shekels.
You know, I want to get into that about shekels and interest and everything, and this is very interesting that you bring it up, because the con game that you have brought on to this country and the world for many years is that you're allegedly God's chosen people.
Is it true that the Jews run the world?
Yeah.
Can you explain?
We were chosen to take responsibility for the welfare of the world.
We are God's chosen people. It's just that most Jews don't like to admit it, but our God is Lucifer.
Your God is gold.
Well, that's what we like, is lots of gold, lots of shekels. We let the goyim do the work, and we have a party. That's what they want, so we let them be that.
And this is what's coming and planned in this country, too, isn't it? The United States. September 11, 2001, there were really no Jews in them towers. Well, the 3,000 Jews were not at work that day in those towers. That just gave a lot of people have the impression that the Jewish population out there was aware that something was going to happen and they didn't show up for work that day. Can you explain that?
Well, spiritually, there were a lot of Jews in the towers. A lot of Jews died in those towers, spiritually.
In the days after the September attacks, there were countless rumors about strange coincidences surrounding the events. One report about a group of Middle Eastern men spotted the morning of September 11th parked just across the river from New York City has not gone away. Investigation of their presence has led to questions about whether Israel was conducting espionage on U.S. soil. We're joined now by ABC's John Miller with an exclusive report this evening.
That's right, Elizabeth. This is a case that took the FBI and the CIA more than 2 months to sort out, while 5 Israelis waited in jail. It began when this woman was watching the Twin Towers burning from her apartment in New Jersey. She noticed 3 men on top of a van, posing for pictures with the towers burning in the background.
And I could see that they were like happy. You know, they didn't look shocked to me. You know, they didn't look shocked. I thought it was very strange.
The witness called police, who stopped the van hours later and arrested 5 men. All 5, it turns out, were Israeli. They were turned over to the FBI. Sources tell ABC News during a check of national security databases, some of the men were listed as having had connections with Israeli intelligence. At the FBI, that set off alarm bells. The FBI needed the answers to 3 important questions. Who were these men? What brought them to that parking lot on the morning of September 11th? And did they have any advance knowledge of what was going to happen that day? The men said they were just taking pictures at the time. They said they worked for a company called Urban Moving. The FBI obtained a search warrant for the company's offices.
2 SUVs were filled up with between 9 and 12 boxes and computers.
Not long after the arrests, the offices of Urban Moving were simply abandoned. Almost everything was left behind. In jail, the 5 Israelis were repeatedly interrogated and given lie detector tests. Stephen Gordon was their American lawyer.
They were asked questions if they had ever been approached by or hired by any non-United States intelligence community.
While there is still some debate among American intelligence officials, many investigators believe some of the men were part of an Israeli operation aimed at monitoring radical Islamic charities that support groups like Hamas, something lawyers for the 5 men and the Israeli government strongly deny.
These 5 Israelis were not involved in any intelligence operation in the United States. The story is simply false.
In the end, the FBI concluded there was no evidence that any of the 5 men had advance knowledge of the September 11th plot. After 71 days, the 5 Israelis were deported, leaving some ruffled feathers among both U.S. and Israeli officials. According to federal officials, the 5 men have been barred from returning to the United States for 10 years, they say because they violated immigration laws.
Old Silverman, who's a good friend of mine there, Larry, he got a twofer. He got a 2-for-1 there, and he doubled the insurance magically just 3 months before it happened, and then he got a 2-for hit on it, so he made like 4 times his money. Well, we have all the ammunition companies, we have all the aircraft companies, all the gun manufacturers, all the supplies. We're making a lot of money. All the organizations out there, the Jew controls it. Everybody knows that.
You know, I've read in your Talmud where it says that if you're to have any opposition, you will control that opposition.
Well, of course, the smartest thing is to own both sides of every game.
But
that way you know the outcome. We own the Republicans, we own the Democrats. We got a lot of good Jewish boys on both of them, and the rest of them are good bought and paid for Shabbos Goy, and we throw a few shekels into their campaign contributions that we give them, and our Jewish lobby in Israel, and they take the money and they do what we want so that we can make some shekels. If nobody stops it, who's to say we shouldn't be doing it?
You know, I was talking to you about using the K's that's on the food boxes and the food sources. This is a private Jewish tax that people unsuspectedly are paying, aren't they?
Well, some know, some don't, but they better pay, because if they don't pay, they don't get the item. And the rabbis need to make some shekels too.
Jews are rich. They're the wealthiest, what's called religious ethnic group in the United States. They are the richest, and they tend to support liberal causes. They give lots of money to universities, lots of money to the arts world. Jews take it as a source of pride to give to institutions which advance culture and the elevation of the mind. Unfortunately, it has an underside or a downside. It means incredible cultural power. It's not just at the Ivy Leagues. You take City University of New York. They're terrified because a lot of the graduates of even the City University of New York, who are Jewish, they made it. They became very wealthy. And now the screws are being turned. Clamp down on these anti-Israel, anti-Semitic demonstrations, or you're not getting our money. And so the repression has been actually, it's been beyond belief. You can't say anything now critical of Israel.
They submitted a bid to have the CERN most advanced collider built here at UC Davis. And it is
You're talking about the Large Hadron
The Large
Collider.
Hadron Collider.
Okay.
Yes, and Japan bid on it. Davis bid on it, or California did.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow it ended up half in Switzerland and half in France. And I asked Laurence, why did they do that? He said, well, then neither France nor Switzerland own it. Someone else controls it. It's those hidden bloodlines that funded the development of HARP and the collider from the very beginning. This is a restoration of the Silk Road, which was 5,000 years at least of peaceful trading that built an accumulation of tremendous wealth. And that wealth was looted in World War II from Southeast Asia and China, Asian countries, to benefit the ancient Iranian bloodlines from Central Asia, who have ruled the world since the First World Empire, the Parthian Empire built by the Persians.
I noticed that there's a lot of investment by Jewish financiers into Asia, most parts of Asia. I also know that Jewry is an Asiatic race. Is this correct?
Well, we're really all over the world, but yeah, I guess you could say we started in Asia.
Yes, that's... Now, the Hebrews did not start there, and the Israelites didn't start there. You really have no bearing to be in the Hebrews or the Israelites. You are not the dispersed nations, plural, of the tribes of Jacob, who were surnamed Israel.
I want to discuss a little bit of sensitive history. And if I go to sensitive history, well, then I must quote sources that say it rather than that I say it. This is a fascinating book. This is a book that was written by a Jewish man. And he confronted the thinking of many of the high-placed individuals of the world. In this book, Benjamin H. Friedman, a Jewish man, writes about the Jews and reveals an interesting history. He states that the present Jews in Palestine are not the true descendants of the Judeans, but rather descendants of the Khazars. In the letter addressed to D. David Goldstein of Boston, Massachusetts, a convert to Catholicism, the author, Benjamin Friedman of New York City, dated October 1954, provides some fascinating insights. This is in the public domain. Benjamin H. Friedman claims that the word Jew was only introduced into the English language in the 18th century, and that Jesus referred to himself as a Judean and not as a Jew. Inscribed upon the cross when Jesus was crucified were the Latin words Iesus Nazarenus Rex Iodeorum, which means Jesus of Nazareth, ruler of the Judeans. Now this is fascinating. I went and checked it, and it is so. Yes, it happens to be so.
Now, this teaching or idea comes from this man, Benjamin Friedman. He was an American businessman, but also an anti-Zionist Jew. I find it interesting and can't help but wonder if his Jewish perspective helped him come to the conclusion that Jesus was not a Jew, that he was just simply a Judean. Now, I, of course, don't agree with that. Jesus was born to a Jewish mother, Mary, and they practiced all of the Jewish traditions. According to Benjamin Friedman's teachings and this idea, this would cancel out Jesus Christ as the Jewish Messiah because he simply isn't Jewish, according to Benjamin Friedman. So I can see how the adversary would use this teaching and ideology to hide the truth, to cause people to be blind to it.
Well, we tell all the Goyim that they worship a Jew and they believe it, so what's the difference?
Now the word Jew today has a religious as well as a political connotation. You think of a Jewish entity, a government, but you also think of their religion incorporated at the same time, whereas the term Judean is a geographic connotation.
Modern Judaism is not the faith of the people from whom our Lord emerged. The Talmudic faith is alien to Moses, to Isaac, to Jacob, to all the prophets. Christians must know that the Talmud blasphemes Christ. It blasphemes the Mother of God.
Now the Talmud refers to Christ as his mother was a whore and he was a bastardized son of a Roman soldier. Is this what's being taught in the synagogues?
Well, every good Jew knows that.
There is no separate, no second, no different salvation. The economy of God is in Jesus Christ alone. And this error only leads to more errors.
They are destroying this planet. They're just doing it because they can.
And I have a copy here, and I wonder if I could possibly ask you to read it for us.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. View with favour the establishment of Palestine as a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavours to facilitate the achievement of this object. It being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation. Yours, Arthur Balfour.
And here it is, the Balfour Declaration.
I genuinely feel it's one of the most extraordinary moments in the history of the Jewish people. If you think it took 3,000 years to get to this. And then you say, how did this miracle happen? It's the most incredible piece of opportunism. I mean, if you think you had an impoverished would-be scientist, Chaim Weizmann, who somehow gets to England, meets a few people, including members of my family, seduces them. He has such great charm and conviction. He gets to Balfour, And he unbelievably persuades Balfour and Lloyd George, the Prime Minister, and most of the ministers, that this idea of the national home for Jews, you have the first bit, which promises a national home rather than the national home, and then you have the bit that nothing that's to be done should in any way harm the Arab community. There were two branches of the Rothschild family primarily concerned. Other Rothschilds felt it was better to be assimilated into English life, and although they retained their interest in Judaism and Jewish life, they didn't think it was a good thing that this national home should be established in Israel. So it was something that divided my family, as with many other families.
We are very against the state of Israel. It's a very big problem for us.
So you guys don't approve of a state of Israel before the Messiah comes, right?
Yes. Zionism is not Judaism. It's a very other thing.
Is it true that you are against the whole concept of Israel as a state?
That is not only, when you say I am, this means the Jews who are true to the Torah across the board in every part of the world. All the rabbinical authorities opposed Zionism from day one. As soon as they came up with the concept, the chief rabbis, we have documents, historic documents, the chief rabbi of Palestine, the chief rabbi of Palestine was approached by the United Nations in 1947, and he wrote, "We furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine." And I think it's important to see Jews demonstrate, and they're getting constantly, till today, they made demonstrations and they're getting beaten by the Zionist police. People can see this is an ongoing...
If Christianity were about defending a flag, Jesus would have picked up a sword. But he didn't. He picked up a cross. And yet somehow a movement that's supposed to follow that man, a man that said, "My kingdom is not of this world," has decided that protecting a modern nation state called Israel is the center of Christian duty, that blessing it, defending it, and justifying it at all costs is some holy assignment carved into the marrow of the gospel. But I'll say it plainly, Christianity does not require allegiance to the state of Israel. That's not heresy, that's scripture. The word carried spiritual identity. It meant those called into covenant with God. It had nothing to do with missiles or borders or UN resolutions. When the modern state was named Israel, it was not a return to biblical obedience. It was a calculated decision, an intentional conflation of nationalism with theology. It was branding, and a powerful one because it worked. Because now when people hear Israel, they imagine sacred continuity. They imagine divine appointment. They imagine the Old Testament alive and well in 2025, and they are wrong. The Israel of the Hebrew Scriptures was not a Western-backed nuclear power. It was a wandering tribe, a nation in exile, a people constantly called back to justice, humility, and mercy, and often condemned for chasing empire.
So you're telling me the sons of Jacob, who was the son of Isaac, the son of Abraham, represented the 12 tribes of Israel, one being Joseph, one being Judah, that all the brothers banded together and didn't like Joseph because he was the favorite brother, the one who was gifted in biblical prophecy. They wanted to kill him, but Judah rose up and said, hey, instead of killing him, let's actually betray him and simply just sell him. Those are all the brothers that went on to represent the 12 tribes of Israel, full nation of Israel. And many years later, of course, the brothers being reconciled and creating this great nation, once again in the same household, there was betrayal and unrest because there was one king who was owed the kingship of Israel by birthright, and there was another king who just seemed to be like the favorite king of the people. So that's when Israel broke in two. Now we have all the tribes of Israel, northern Israel, the larger Israel, but then we have the tribe of Judah who broke off and now is just called Judah, the southern part of Israel, under two different kings. Then you're going to tell me that when they turned their back on the Lord, and the Lord warned them, but they were all sent to these other nations, they were all taken captive, and now they finally are making their way back to the promised land, to Israel, rededicate themselves to the Lord, that the prophet Zechariah is told by the Lord that although they are about to enter a season of judgment, that he is the one who is supposed to shepherd them. So he's preaching repentance. He's being honest with them. He's calling them back to the Lord, regardless of what their worldly circumstances may look like right now. When he goes to the chief priest to get his wages, they give him a slave's wages, 30 pieces of silver. True betrayal to a prophet that God is using to draw him closer to himself. God actually tells Zechariah to just take those 30 pieces of silver and toss them into the temple to the potter. And right after Zechariah does that, it says in scripture that he takes his proverbial staff, because that is how a shepherd would actually lead the sheep, right? With the staff. He took the staff of union, the staff that brought the brotherhood of Israel together, and he broke it, basically breaking the union, the covenant, the brotherhood of Israel and Judah apart. And then you're going to tell me that Jesus Christ of Nazareth, who came from the bloodline of Judah, is going to be betrayed by Judas, which is actually the Hebrew name for Judah, and he's going to be betrayed by him for 30 pieces of silver. When Judah realizes what he's done, he has to give the money back to the chief priests. They're going to say, sorry, too late. He's going to toss it into the temple, go and hang himself, and the chief priests are going to buy a potter's field to bury bodies in with those 30 pieces of silver. And Jesus, from that line of Judah, is the one true Israel who came to make the new covenant, came to bring the union back together, who came to not only sew Israel and Judah back together, but graft the Gentiles in as well to give us all life.
It's very interesting that Judah, agreeing with his brothers and wanting to get rid of Joseph, he decided on a different option. He said, instead of just killing him, let's at least make a profit off of this. Let's financially benefit and get some money. So from very early on, we see this theme of money, financial gain, benefit. What's in it for me? How can I get rid of a problem, but also benefit and gain from that problem? Not so that it's a win-win, but a win-lose. And we see this pattern and this theme surrounding the tribe of Judah concerning this theme of being disloyal. Disloyal to those closest to you, disloyal to family because of pride, envy, or the desire to get financial gain. And we see this repeated pattern of financial gain, trying to achieve what you feel is justice, trying to justify your resolution to a problem, what you see as a problem, something that chips away at your pride, justifying a choice that you know is wrong, but twisting everything in such a way that you get other people to agree with you and support you in that choice. And at the loss and expense of another, the person you betrayed, the person you were disloyal to, you receive gain and benefit.
Family. This is also documented in a book called The Gilded Leaf by Patrick Reynolds, who was a bloodline descendant specifically and in the actual inheritance of the Winston cigarette company, you know, the tobacco empire that ended up buying Nabisco Foods that ended up running the world.
What relation is it to you? Like an uncle?
I don't know that I am a bloodline relative of that guy.
Oh, okay.
Patrick Reynolds specifically. My Reynolds family is the one that does the black gold stuff, all the secret, disgusting, dirty money. They're the white launderers of the money, right? But you got to have your seedy, corrupt group. And that's what my family did. They did all the dirty stuff.
Wow.
And so but in his book, in his firsthand account, they talk about the Joshua coin and them using a coin that was from Judas that he betrayed Yeshua with, and the 30 pieces of silver that was the blood guilt money. They would touch that silver coin to anything they wanted, and it would grow an empire. The cost was always massive bloodshed and a massive demand of life, and that's always what the serpent required. He wanted life. And so, like, on one side of the equation, that's what they used to build the Reynolds empire. That's what they used to go down Alcoa and all the aluminum industry and all of the stuff they spray on us and the stuff they poison us with and inject us with and all the variables of complexities of targeting that they've done against us. That all comes from that covenant that those two brothers sat down, did, and entered into a blood covenant with the dragon, man. And this is what the fruit of it was. Well, my family entered into that on a different route through this priest class thing. And that's what they would practice down there. And that's the same old religion that people have been using a long time. So
we see that pattern all throughout the centuries surrounding these descendants. That pattern and theme seems to follow these descendants all throughout history, throughout all the different centuries. But we know how this all turns out, how it ends.
The prophets didn't worship Israel. They rebuked it over and over and over again for war, for greed, for turning their back on the poor and the foreigner. You know, the same things modern Israel does with American funding now. The idea that Christians are commanded to bless the state of Israel is not in the Gospels. It is not in the epistles. It is not in the teachings of Jesus Christ. It's in the talking points of televangelists and the foreign policy of end-time grifters. The Gospel does not preach that God's blessings is tied to the modern border of Tel Aviv or the Iron Dome. Jesus never said, "Blessed are those who back Likud." Paul never wrote that all who oppose military action are cursed. The early church wasn't fundraising for defense systems or declaring settlements on stolen land as prophetic fulfillment. And yes, the Old Testament speaks of Israel as God's chosen people. And yes, land was part of that covenant, but in Christian theology, the story shifts. The covenant widens and the veil tears. And the new Israel, the church, is defined not by soil, but by spirit, not by war, but by witness. And it is made up of anyone from anywhere who walks in faith. Jew, Gentile, Arab, Roman, enslaved, free, all in one Christ Jesus.
Did you know that the historical biblical name Israel is a person and not a land? Israel is not the name of a land at all. They'll have you believe that Israel was mentioned in the Old Testament, in the Bible, and even in the Quran. Of course, Israel was mentioned in the Abrahamic books, but it was mentioned because it's the name of Jacob.
In the Bible, Israel was not a place first, it was a person. It was Jacob, wrestling with God by a river until dawn, scarred by truth and renamed by grace. Israel meant one who struggles with God, and it became the name of a people, not a flag, not a government, not a modern nation carved out in 1948 by colonial politics and American guilt.
His name was changed to Israel. The land of Israel, we're saying the land of Jacob. Israelites are the followers of Jacob. And who's his grandfather? Abraham, of course. So Abraham and his followers in the Old Testament and Bible were promised the land of Canaan or Canaan. They were not promised the land of Israel. There's no such thing. And it was described as from the river of Egypt to the great river of the Euphrates, which is in modern-day Iraq. Oh, so there were people who lived there before the people of Abraham? Of course there were people before them, because the Canaanites lived there.
There is no divine nation, there is only divine love. And if you think that love stops at a border fence or a flagpole or the edge of a crater where children used to live, then you don't know Christ at all.
Zionism is only around 100 years old. It is the transformation from religion to nationalism, to materialism, created by non-religious Jews who hated the religion. And they really didn't want Judaism. They didn't even want to make their state in Palestine, only in Uganda at the first meetings.
And by the way, Israel wasn't always going to be the name for this current colonial project. Other suggested names included Zion, Yehuda, even the Jewish state as a name. But anyway, it was our friend Ben Gurion, who suggested the name Israel. And a bunch of people agreed, and there you go.
The reason they used the name Israel, the Star of David, hijacking, stealing the identity of Judaism and the Jewish people, is in order to get a legitimacy for their existence, that people should say, oh, it's God given to them, and that they should put fear and intimidate people from speaking up against their actions. It's against the Torah in its essence. The concept for Jews to have a state is expressly forbidden in the Torah, in the Jewish teaching. Since the destruction of the temple 2,000 years ago, we were told by the Almighty in a prophecy of King Solomon, and that we are forbidden to have our own entity, our own state, our own kingdom, even in an uninhabited land. And this was held by all Jews around the world for thousands of years. And it makes it worse, compounds the sin, the crime in having the state, because this state of Israel that these nationalists made it in Palestine, made it in a land that was inhabited by the majority Muslim people, by the Palestinian people. So to steal their land, to kill, to oppress, to banish them from the homes, it flies in the face and contradicts everything of the Torah that says thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, that one has to emulate God, be compassionate. So they've used our identity to rebel against God and to desecrate God's name, and to create a rift between Jews and Muslims, and to make a river, an endless river of blood for the Muslims, for the Palestinian people, and anti-Semitism for the Jews, and death for the Jews also. This is unfathomable and unacceptable.
The New Testament doesn't tell Christians to defend a country. It tells them to defend the poor, to defend the outcast, to walk with the wounded, to make peace, not justifications for war, to see the face of God not in a flag, but in the suffering child behind the rubble. And yet today, American Christians fly Israeli flags next to crosses as if those things belong together. Jesus didn't die so the modern church could become a lobby group. He didn't rise so we could bless bombs. He didn't preach love for the least of these so we could side with whoever has better tanks. And if your church is preaching that blessing Israel is the key to God's favor, then you're not in church. You're in a cult, praying to a carved-up God who only speaks Hebrew and votes Republican. The gospel doesn't ask you to bless a nation. It does ask you to bless the peacemakers, to comfort the mourners, to defend the innocent, and reject violence dressed as virtue. They equate criticism of the Israeli government with blasphemy. They pretend that military aid is a sacrament, and that genocide is somehow covered under the blood of covenant promise. And Christ weeps at that lie, because if the gospel means anything, it means you do not get to use God as a shield for political violence. You do not get to bomb refugee camps and quote Jeremiah. You do not get to drop white phosphorus and call it fulfillment. That's not Christianity, that's idolatry. This doesn't mean you have to hate Israel. It doesn't mean you can't believe in its right to exist, but it does mean that if you are a follower of Christ, your loyalty cannot be to any nation, not even one with a biblical name. Your loyalty is to justice, to truth, to love that doesn't end at a checkpoint or a drone feed.
The state of Israel does not represent all Jews, and certainly does not represent the Jewish religion. According to Jewish religion, all of this is criminal. This is not only criminal according to international law. This is a true violation of Judaism. And still, those people who choose not to follow Judaism misuse that very same religion to justify all those crimes forbidden in Judaism. If people will ask me my advice, the leaders of Israel should wake up tomorrow morning and step out of the Knesset and return the land back to indigenous population. I guarantee peace.
It's not only secular, because the founders of Zionism and the people, the Zionists today, are not only secular. They basically, many of them, hate Judaism. They hate God and his religion. For example, I have a friend of mine who grew up in Zionist education, grew up in Jerusalem. And he told me that what he was taught is the Jewish people have two enemies. The first is the religious Jew, and the second is the Arab. But that movement, the movement of Zionism, who is secular and who refuses to follow Judaism, they misuse this very same religion they refuse to follow, and they misuse it to justify crimes which are forbidden in this very same religion, because killing and stealing, oppressing an entire people, all of this is forbidden in Judaism.
You're coming right out on television, in the newspapers, on the radio, and you're telling the people exactly what you're going to do before you do it, and they're brain dead.
Karmic disclosure, it centers around a very simple and, I believe, unsettling idea. And that is, if someone reveals their intention in any form, art, story, symbol, performance, lyric, you absorb it without resisting it, then you've spiritually agreed to it. So in that case, the storyteller believes that they are then absolved because the truth wasn't hidden. It was disguised as entertainment. Now, to the people who believe in this, disclosure is a spiritual transaction. It's a shifting of the moral weight. And it's not because people consciously agreed, but because they unconsciously accepted the imagery, the messaging, and the vibe. So their worldview teaches that silence equals permission and that consumption equals consent.
So they have to tell us what they're doing. So they tell us in movies, they tell us in language. They've given us the clues. It's on us if we can't figure it out.
Yep.
So they believe.
Yeah.
They get their karmic get out of jail free pass.
Yeah.
We told them.
We destroyed them, but we told them we would. We gave them a chance. I'm not sure if that's going to work for them somehow.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Jews would have us believe that there's something sacred about the Western Wall. Goyim are snatched by the divine presence, who supposedly dwells within its crevices and stones. Not only are our politicians selling their souls to the Jews at a Roman fortress named Fort Antonia, misnamed the Western Wall, they're participating in a lewd occult ritual where the so-called divine presence is actually Satan himself. God will not be mocked.
And kissing up to Israel or that wall is like idolatry. It's like fornicating with the gods of other nations. People need to read their Bible. AIPAC even takes politicians to the Western Wall, also known as the Wailing Wall, so as to give homage. For you Christians, that's not the worship of Christ, but the worship of foreign gods. Let's talk about the Wailing Wall. It's the so-called last remaining structure of the Second Temple. And as we've discussed in the previous episode and in the end of the age explanation, this is the temple that the Lord destroyed in 70 AD. He did so to judge the Jews who refused the sacrifice of Christ and who kept offering up their own sacrifices and persecuted the saints and who kept resisting the Holy Spirit. So why are so-called Christians honoring the wall that the Lord destroyed? That is complete ignorance. The wall is not holy, which means to be set apart. The only one who is holy, who is set apart, is our triune God, Christ Jesus, and our Heavenly Father and His Holy Spirit. And the only other ones who are called holy are the saints. We are to be set apart from the world and united to Christ in our spirit, soul, and body. And kissing up to Israel or that wall is like idolatry. It's like fornicating with the gods of other nations.
All should have known is that the Wailing Wall is the seat of a satanic ritual outlined by the 13th century Jewish occult system known as the Kabbalah, as expounded in the Zohar and expanded upon by the 18th century Hassidic movement. You see, this so-called divine presence at the Wailing Wall is actually the Kabbalistic feminine emanation of their false god, the Shekinah. Watch closely how the rabbis thrust their pelvises back and forth in a prescribed prayer movement called davening, in which the Jew copulates with the Shekinah in order to give birth to an erotic union with the Ein Sof, the Kabbalistic masculine emanation of their false god.
Holy city. Jerusalem is referred to as the holy city. Why the holy city? It's because every kind of religion that has ever been on the face of the earth has come out of Jerusalem. They've had blood rituals, moon worship, Saturn worship, sun worship.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Although if you do some research, the answer is pretty clear. Raised in America by secular atheist parents who were also revisionist Zionists, the apple didn't fall far from the tree. Despite his occasional Old Testament reference to Israel-friendly verses that typically have something to do with winning in battle in a war and alluding to divine promises to the Jewish people from time to time, not one time in all of his speeches and interviews and press conferences, everywhere, has he ever one time admitted and confess that he even believes in the God of Israel. Not only does he not attend synagogue, eat kosher, observe Shabbat or anything, but ask him if he believes in the God of Israel, and he will dodge every time. And the same is true with current Israeli President Isaac Herzog. He actually comes from a religious dynasty. His grandfather was the chief rabbi of Israel, but Herzog himself, calculated ambiguity. Never affirms and never denies. I mean, what kind of leader of a nation can't even confess God before men while governing over the land that was given by a covenant of promise? The answer? One who serves another master.
As I said before, the whole concept, the idea of Zionism to build a sovereign homeland for Jews is in total contrast of Judaism. This is unjust for the people of Palestine that this voice is attempted to be silenced. But it's not only doing injustice for the Palestinian people, this is doing injustice for the Jewish people as well, because when you conflate Judaism and Zionism, you conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, you're making a statement as if all Jews support all what's going on and as if all Jews are accountable to what's going on. But we always need to know better than that, and we try to educate people to understand that anti-Zionism has nothing to do with anti-Semitism, because Judaism and Zionism are not the same. Judaism is a religion, Zionism is a political movement, should never be conflated. A lot of Jewish people in New York, many of them support Israel, but there's a massive community who is anti-Zionist.
It's one of the poorest towns in America, with 40% living beneath the federal poverty line. Many men here are religiously studying the Torah full-time and heavily rely on public assistance and welfare in the form of Medicaid, housing vouchers, food stamps, and cash aid to support their giant families that God commanded them to have. And how many kids do most people have out here?
17, 18.
How do they afford 17, 18 kids? And sends their kids to private religious schools. And
Well, we did a good job with the public school system. We got you to put all of your children in there. You notice that the Jew doesn't put his children in there. They go to the Hebrew Academy where we teach them the real things, and then they go to the synagogue and they learn the real important things. But we send your kids to the public school. We even have you tax yourself from your property so that you never own your property. And so if you don't make your property tax, we're going to take your property. You can bet on that. And we have you put your kid in a 12-year babysitting is about all it does because you don't learn anything. And then by that time, the kids, they get to be teenagers, and then we give them the music. Not that we really want to call it music because, oy vey, that's not music. But they listen to that, and then they want to do what they want to do, and so we sell them drugs, and we make a lot of money off your children. Your children from cradle to grave. All we do is make money off of them. You're cattle. You're goyim.
And why is it okay for Jewish people to live together in a homogenous Jew-only community, but it's illegal when white people try to build their own?
If a secular guy is going to move in, he's going to be uncomfortable. I don't want my kids should play in the house of a secular guy, because the reason why I want to live here because I want to be religious.
I see.
I want my kids should be religious.
Sure. That makes sense.
I don't hate them. I love
Yeah.
them.
No, that's reasonable.
I will have everybody.
Yeah. Have you heard of the all-white community in the Ozarks?
I know, yeah.
Would you agree with them doing that?
I don't know. I don't want to live there. The point is not this.
But you think they should be allowed to do so, though, right?
I have a lot of opinions.
Do you think they should?
As I told you, you have to sit down with me.
Oh man, all right, you're a complicated guy. Could I buy a house there? Would they let me?
Legally, I think you.
Legally, I could, but they wouldn't, right?
It's a good question.
Welcome to Curious Joel, a traditional community of modesty and values. In keeping with our traditions and religious customs, we kindly ask that you dress and behave in a modest way while visiting our community. This includes wearing long skirts or pants, covered necklines, sleeves past the elbow, use appropriate language, maintain gender separation in all public areas. Thank you for respecting our values. So you gotta wonder what these people do for employment. You'll notice the Mexicans out here are doing the hard labor, and the Jewish people, I'm not sure what they do. Pregunta. Esta ciudad, Jews?
Yeah.
Solo?
Yeah, it's only the Jews.
And las personas hispanic trabaja por construcción?
Yeah.
Jews trabaja en construcción aquí o no?
Only the Hispanics.
Hispanics? Okay. Thank you, my friend. Okay, so this is sort of a well-known fact, but it's good to hear from him that the Hispanics are working the construction out here and the Jews are living here. You work in the medical industry.
Yes.
And you help someone who's elderly or?
Well, it's for pediatrics.
Pediatrics.
It's a private office for Dr. Wurzberger.
Okay, I've noticed that seemingly only Hispanics are out here working.
Yes.
And I have not seen many of the Jewish people here working.
Yeah.
Do you know what's going on there?
That I don't know.
Excuse me. What do most people do for work out here? Question for you, sir. What do people do for work?
I'm not a news reporter. We have to...
Okay, what do you do for work? Okay, you don't want to talk? And what do you do?
I'm a student, and also I'm doing home care.
What are you studying?
I'm studying Torah.
Torah? And who pays for education?
I try to work on overtime.
Overtime?
Yes.
Where do you work overtime?
I work home care.
Home care?
Night, yes.
Is it like, do you have kids?
I have kids, yes.
How many kids?
3.
How do you afford to raise 3 kids while being a student?
Because I work very hard. I want to study the Torah. I'm very proud.
How do you afford to study the Torah, though?
God help me.
Does the American taxpayer help you, too?
Also, yes.
Yep. How many people out here are on like welfare in the form of like housing assistance or Section 8 or EBT, SNAP, Medicare?
Yes.
And that allows you to study the Torah?
Yes.
And raise your kids?
Yes.
Do they get tax credits for the kids?
What they get.
Question for you, sir. What do you do for work out here? Are you on the phone? Or are you listening to the radio? Okay. How do you make money?
My wife.
Your wife? What does she do for work?
What is this? What?
Interview. Good to meet you. For YouTube. Do you work a job for money?
I?
Yeah.
No.
Does your wife?
Yes.
She does. Does your wife go to work to make money and you study Torah?
Where are you?
Tyler. Good to meet you. I'm just doing a YouTube video about this place. I find it fascinating.
I don't have time. I have to move.
But where are you going if you don't work?
I study.
So you study. And does your wife work? What industry does she work in? Teaching, education, children? And how do you afford the kids if you don't work? Your wife? Excuse me, what do women work at here? What jobs do women work in here? Is it mostly childcare? Do you work a job as well as raise the kids? Do the women raise the kids in? Okay. How do people afford to have families? So like as you raise baby, do you also go to work at some point? What do you do for work? Do you study the Torah? Do you work a job? No? Does your wife work a job? Do you work? Are you a student? Man, I can't do this anymore. Excuse me, sir. Do you study the Torah? Hey. Oh, you speak on his behalf? How do you know that? Get on out of here.
I'm in sales.
Are you lying to me? Just the way you looked at him, I'm just like, what? Is it just ink? What do you do?
I'm doing sales.
What do you sell?
Food.
Why do you keep looking at him? Okay. What food do you sell?
Chocolates.
What? Do the men work or do they study the Torah? The sheer density of minivans out here is a phenomenon in and of itself.
There's a big topic that's going around on this 6 million Holocaust that took place during World War II of the Jews at Buchenwald, Auschwitz, and different places. A lot of information has come out here, Rabbi Finkelstein, that it's all myth and it's all conjecture. Could I have your view on this?
Whether it's 6 million or 600,000 or 60,000, it's just a number.
Oh, it's just a number, but the thing that I want to get to you at is that, you know, the 1934 World Encyclopedia stated that there was only 3.5 million Jews in all of Europe. How did 3.5 million Jews populate themselves to 6 million? This is the question I'd like answered.
Well, it's certainly a good question, there's no doubt about it. You know, numbers, what can I say about numbers? The important thing is that Jews have always been persecuted all throughout the history of the world forever and still are.
It's to the point here, Rabbi Finkelstein, where there's more Holocaust survivors getting money, getting payments, financial payments, than there were Holocaust people who died, allegedly among the Jews. Where did all these people come from?
Listen, again, the numbers, you know, you keep arguing about the numbers. The bottom line is that the Jews are entitled because we've been persecuted for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and so we're entitled. Even 100 years from now, there'll be people collecting money on the Holocaust.
So I want to tell the British people that in Germany, nobody at the time knows where the 6 million Jews were killed by the Germans. They all know that this still is the most terrible crime that ever happened in history, done by the Germans. But if you have such a big crime and can't tell us where it happened, I myself have asked all the institutes that could know it, even the Center of the Jews in Germany, and all the judges and so on, but nobody could tell me and answer me within 5 years. Not one group or institute or minister or lawyer did answer my question. My conclusion is that then the Holocaust didn't exist, and I shall publish this in the internet. And so I wrote into the internet, the Holocaust didn't exist. And I gave all the examples, what I have done to find it out. And nothing happened. Now already 2.5 months. So I am quite convinced now, and tell it to everybody, that this biggest crime didn't happen because there was no place where it took place. So it's quite simple that now everybody who has been charged or even put into prison because he had denied the Holocaust, and there are hundreds in Germany that had to suffer such a punishment.
If I could make a point, now she said the fact that 6 million Jews died. However, in 1988, the site at Auschwitz where people can go and tour the gas chambers, They lowered their figure from 4 million dead to 1 million dead. So that was 3 million taken out of the equation overnight. Where did these 3 million go? Were they never there in the first place? Were they in the camps and did they survive? And if you can lose 3 million people overnight, who's to say that 1 million remaining figure is not also wrong?
And let me ask you this question. Weren't some of these figures ascertained after the fact because they went back and did censuses after?
The source of the famous 6 million figure is an affidavit by by somebody who was brought in at the Nuremberg trial in 1945-46. Even Raoul Hilberg, who's considered one of the major figures in the Holocaust, Holocaust historian, he's professor at the University of Vermont. He concedes himself that the 6 million figure is based upon crude calculations. It is only highly dubious, and he says we must re-examine this whole question of the 6 million. Look, it's very interesting, Montel. People have heard over and over about 6 million Jews dying in Europe during the Second World War. How many people in this audience know how many Germans died during the Second World War? How many Americans died during the Second World War? How many Chinese died during the Second World War? In America, as time goes by, the more time passes, the more there's emphasis on the fate of one particular people during the Second World War, almost to the exclusion of everyone else. How many...
They share the myth that Israel is the result of the Holocaust. It is absolutely false. It's a myth. It never happened. Prior to World War II, there were some 4.5 million Jews in what was called Eastern Europe outside of the Soviet Union. These people couldn't stay where they were. They lived among hostile peoples, people who didn't like them, peoples who hated them, many of them, most of them. There was an economic crisis of tremendous proportions. Of 3.3 million Jews in 1939 in Poland, 1/3 were on or below the poverty level. Jewish children couldn't go to school because they didn't have shoes in the winter to go to school with. There was a decline, constant decline in the 1930s. But there was nowhere to go. America was closed. Britain was closed. Western Europe had closed by then. South America was closed. Palestine was closed by the British from 1936 on.
How many Jews died in the Holocaust, do you know? 6 million? Not true. Not true. Can I comfort you a little bit? Nobody told you that before. Not even 3 million. Big discount, no? 50% off. Not even 3 million. So really, he killed his own people. Technically, they come to Shamayim, these people, these goyim, say, wow, we lost from both sides. We got killed like Jews, and we don't have a share to the world to come. That's really what happened.
You're a lying Jew is what you are.
You could say that, but even when we lie, we tell the truth.
Why did you do it? Why did you tell such a big lie to so many people for so long?
It wasn't a lie. It was my imagination. And in my imagination, in my mind, I believed it. Even now I believe it.
How can you say it wasn't a lie? It wasn't true, and you know it's not true.
Just about the Russian liberating Auschwitz, and there's never any snow, and the snow was honestly that high, and so I have some connection with the Russian embassy, and I was there once, and I said, something puzzles me. Those photos are fakes because there's no snow. And they said, well, yes, they are not fakes, but when the army came, they didn't have cameras, they didn't photograph. So only much later, when they realized we should have pictures of it, they took pictures like you see now, but this is definitely not in Auschwitz.
That's why so many religious people died in the Holocaust. Why? They were keeping mitzvot. Some of them were learning, rabbis. They didn't scream to all this reform. What are you doing? Why are you driving on Shabbat? Why are you taking buses on Shabbat? Why you marry German women? Why you change the Siddur? Instead of Jerusalem, you put Berlin. Why you walk with no yarmulke and tzitzit anymore? Why your kids go to Christian schools and to public schools? As long as me and my children are religious, it's not my problem what my brother and his family do. It's not your problem. I mean, it's supposed to hurt you. That's the whole concept of kiruv. How is it possible that a kosher Jew will go an hour of his life without doing kiruv? How is it possible? That's why so many religious people died in the Holocaust.
And we see this example with how this group of people viewed their very own when they felt that they weren't keeping the Sabbath day holy in the way that they believed they should, according to the way they interpreted the law. This anger for their own kind not keeping the Sabbath according to the way that they interpret the law fueled this justification for ending the lives of those who they felt were the perpetrators, those who they felt were not honoring this law, according to the way that they interpreted it. If you can't represent this group of people in the way that they believe you should be to the rest of the world, you're not worthy of life. You don't deserve to live.
Everyone around the world believes that the Holocaust took place. Why do you think it didn't?
Well, Montel, it's very important to understand that no one says that those pictures are not real, as you indicated at the beginning of the program. The pictures are very real, they're very horrible, they're very tragic, and we've all seen them. We've all heard that 6 million Jews died in the Second World War during the Holocaust. But it's very important to understand what these pictures show and what they don't show. These pictures were taken at the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp at the end of the war by the British when they liberated the camp. The people shown these pictures, and it's a very, very terrible pictures. Nobody denies that. Nobody says it didn't happen. Nobody says it's not true. These people were victims of starvation and disease. They died in the last weeks of the war. And they died in the last weeks of the war as, in fact, indirect victims of the war. British doctors who were at the camp themselves at the time the camp was liberated, and many inmates who were at the camp there and elsewhere have also confirmed that conditions at Belsen, although certainly not a country club, were relatively good until the final weeks and months of the war. And that was because in the final weeks and months of the war, all of Germany, all of Europe was in complete chaos. All the railroads were ruined. It was impossible to supply food. It was impossible to supply water. And particularly at Bergen-Belsen, thousands and thousands and thousands of Jews were evacuated from camps further to the east as the Soviets were coming in and sent into this and other camps which were enormously overcrowded. And these people died in large numbers by disease and starvation. But if the policy of the German government had been to exterminate these people, they would have long since been dead, and these pictures would not have been taken. In fact, the German government policy during the war was a very grim one, it was a very harsh one, and so forth. As I said, again, no one denies those pictures. But those people were not victims of a program or a policy of extermination. And that's what Holocaust revisionists say.
Schindler's List is waiting for the gas to come in.
And all it
lo and
is
behold, all it was
salt and water came raining down on us in this great big, we call it banya, which is a Russian word for a washroom. Bathroom, yeah, but it was a big one, a communal bathroom. It was huge, I would say. It was, the way I remember it, of course, I was little, but the way I remember it, I would say it was at least 30 by 30. It must have been built for that purpose, to wash us down like dogs. Yeah.
But most people, of course, don't know is that the Germans had drawn a line from the Baltic, or actually from the North Cape virtually all the way down to the Bosporus, and anybody that came across that line, whether he was German or Mennonite, Jews for that matter, anybody in Europe could not go across that line without being deloused, because they wanted to keep lice out of Europe, because lice were so dangerous to public health.
That's right. So that was
don't feel badly, you know, you were not picked on because we were Mennonites, or Lutherans.
Or the same for the cutting of hair. I mean, we were all shorn bald in order to stop the lice, the louse problem that we had. Everybody had lice in the war. You know, I mean, this was just common knowledge that everybody had lice, and then of course we had to be deloused and put into Germany.
So Jews cannot claim unique victim status?
No, they cannot. And when I hear the stories about them losing their hair, big deal. None of us had hair.
They expected to find viable gas execution chambers, and even though I had seen the documentation in Toronto, I'm not sure I really believed it all, and I honestly expected to find gas chambers in equipment capable of being utilized for gas execution purposes. The taking of the test sample enabled us to demonstrate that the alleged gas chambers never were utilized or contained hydrogen cyanide gas. The samples in my mind were mainly corroborative. The reasons that I determined that these facilities were not or never could have been gas execution facilities are stated in my report. And it mainly is concerned with the design and fabrication of these facilities, the requirements necessary in the design of a facility that contains a highly explosive and highly poisonous gas. You must have gasketed doors, no windows, means of getting the gas in, means of getting the gas out, something for heating the gas and the air to constantly keep the right temperature, explosion-proof switches, lighting facilities, etc. None of these ever existed. We're talking about brick and mortar buildings without heat, with non-explosion-proof lighting.
The Nazis couldn't have removed the seals and the chimneys or the suction fans or the heating elements to cloak their crimes, that they could not have done those things?
Not without leaving behind holes, mounts, or places that had been repaired and obviously had seen other construction work or changes.
Why are there no blue stains on the walls of the gas chambers of Auschwitz? Auschwitz and many other concentration camps used Cyclone B for murder within their gas chambers. Many people mention, why isn't there the Prussian blue, a chemical reaction made from hydrogen cyanide? This does need to be in the right settings, and if you visit Auschwitz today, you'll go through the first gas chamber. However, after it was no longer needed, it was turned back into a warehouse and also an air raid shelter. However, on the site itself, you can go to Block 3 and you'll see the blue staining on the walls. This, when it was used, killing vermin on the uniforms. If you visit the Majdanek concentration camp near to Lublin, you will see on the back wall of their gas chamber the so-called Prussian blue staining. There have been scientific reports of the concrete, and many of these gas chambers still contain remnants of that Cyclone B. Even the Auschwitz Museum admits that the scratches on the walls, which everyone will photograph, are actually graffiti that has been done since.
Talked about the Holocaust until the late 70s. If you tell it to people, they say that's crazy. I went and got history textbooks, the kind of textbooks you would use in freshman college courses from the 60s, and read them. These are written by Americans about the Second World War. There is nothing about the Holocaust in those books, maybe 2 sentences. It is the weirdest. So you're reading, they got like 15 pages on the Battle of Midway, and they got like a whole thing about the internal political turmoil in the Japanese cabinet. And then they're like, and Hitler was rounding up communists, gypsies, and Jews and placing them in internment camps, period. New paragraph. Meanwhile, Roosevelt was, this is one history textbook after another. This is fascinating. Why? So I was very interested in that part of the book about why we tell the stories we tell. How is it that our understanding of things can suddenly shift? And the Holocaust is this perfect example of this. We went from never mentioning it to it being a kind of central part of our understanding of what happened in the Second World War. And it happened like that. It's an amazing, weird story.
The Red Cross document and the numbers of people killed during the Holocaust. This document was produced in 1984, and for many Holocaust deniers, it's proof that the figures of those who killed in the Holocaust are much lower than perceived.
Now, we recently talked all about this in the last few videos, so I will have all of those links down below. Let's continue.
The Edomites are one of the neighboring and frequent antagonists of ancient Israel. Now, the name Edom comes from a Semitic word meaning red or ruddy. Edom and the Edomites were understood to be descendants of Esau, the older twin of Jacob, son of Isaac, and the grandson of Abraham. The relationship between their ancestors and the Israelites is particularly close. Moab and Ammon were the grandsons of Lot, Abraham's nephews. So they were understood as related to the Israelites, but somewhat distantly. Now, by contrast, the children of Israel, or Jacob, and the descendants of Esau were understood to be much closer kin. But as those of you with siblings know, close relations don't always translate to amicable relations. The kingdoms of Israel and Judah frequently fought with Edom. Saul and David fought against the Edomites in the Arabah. During the reign of Solomon, an exiled king of Edom returned from Egypt and antagonized Solomon's trade routes. Edom again fell to Judahite control under Jehoshaphat, Now, ultimately, the Edomites fell under the influence of the Assyrians and later the Babylonians.
And when the Babylonians were taking the Jews captive, the Edomites cheered them on. And of course, the Jews never forget that. The Edomites were their bitter enemies.
The short book of Obadiah may refer to the Edomites helping either the Arabs or Babylonians attack Judah. Now, this was taken as a particularly egregious insult, since the Edomites and the Israelites were supposed to be brothers. Brothers may bicker and quarrel, but they don't destroy each other. The name Edom disappears after the Old Testament, and this region is referred to as Idumea in the New Testament.
So according to these rabbis, in 70 AD, when Israel was destroyed and Jerusalem was overthrown, many of these Edomians went north to the area that became the Khazarian Empire, that the Edomites were a big part of Khazaria, that they were influential. They married into these Khazarian families, and they were still practicing their paganistic, satanic form of Judaism that they practiced, but they were again a part of the Khazarian power structure. According to the rabbis, these Khazarian Edomites are the ones who influenced the other leaders of the Khazarian Empire to accept Judaism as the religion that was going to be forced upon them by their conquerors.
Well, as the years go by, there is a time when finally they actually threw off the yoke of the Greek Empire. What most people don't realize is during that time, John Hyrcanus, the leader, forced the Edomites to become Jews or die. And this forced conversion of Edomites into Judaism, huge mistake, of course, for a lot of reasons. So when they appointed Herods as kings and so forth, they felt they were putting in place a kind of Jew, if you will. So the Edomites have been on the throne through the Herods, as you know.
Furthermore, these Edomites are the ones who became the great banking families, including the Rothschilds. Remember that Edom in Hebrew means red, because Esau was known to have red hair. His hair was red, and so red kind of became the sigil for Edom and Edomites, and the Rothschild means red shield.
It really starts with Jacob and Esau. Esau is the brother of Jacob, the older brother, and so technically he was the one that should have inherited the birthright, but he sold his birthright to Jacob. And Jacob later goes on to trick his father Isaac by making Isaac believe he was Esau, and thus being granted the blessing from his father. From that moment on, we have this conflict between Esau and his descendants, who are the Edomites, and Jacob and his descendants, who are the Israelites. So we see this conflict with Esau and Jacob, the Edomites and the Israelites, all throughout the Old Testament. Saul, David, Solomon, these great kings of Israel were at constant conflict with the Edomites. In fact, once we get to the New Testament, King Herod I and King Herod II were Edomites. The Sadducees, who we see in constant conflict with Messiah, right? They were partly Edomites. And I think this is why we see so much conflict with Messiah and the Jews in the New Testament. So because Yahushua was doing these things on the Sabbath, the Jewish leaders began to persecute him. In his defense, Yahushua said to them, "My Father is always at his work to this very day, and I too am working." For this reason, they tried all the more to kill him. And so we see this conflict playing out even in the New Testament. Okay, Messiah is being hunted, basically, by these Jewish converts, okay, by the Edomites. The Father himself makes this distinction. "I have loved you," says the Lord, "but you ask, how have you loved us? Was not Esau Jacob's brother, declares the Lord? Yet I have loved Jacob, but Esau I have hated." Again, this is highlighting the destruction of the Edomites during this Second Temple period, where they were forced to come back to the law of Moses. But this is what the Lord Almighty says: "They may build, but I will demolish. They will be called the wicked land, a people always under the wrath of the Lord. You will see it with your own eyes and say, 'Great is the Lord, even beyond the borders of Israel.'" So Yahuwah himself is making the distinction, okay? Jacob, Esau, the Edomites, Israelites, two bloodlines, okay? Basically fighting for supremacy. And the Edomites, their fingerprint is all over who we are calling the Jews in the land of Israel today.
Are those 13 families traceable back to the Nephilim?
Yes. They would keep their genealogies that go back into prehistory. They'll go back twofold, one to a Nephilim or a Rephaim patriarch or matriarch, and to one of the fallen angels. So when Prince Charles, before he became King Charles III, he said he was descended from Vlad the Impaler, which is who Dracula is based on, the vampire movies. And Dracula means son of a dragon, with the A on the end, and it's rooted in Draconta and Dracont, meaning a watcher in Greek.
Now, I've shared this before in past videos from years ago that I noticed the similarities between these two headpieces on Vlad the Impaler and King Charles III. Look at those two headpieces. Both have a blood red stone on the front in the center, and in fact, Vlad's headdress mysteriously disappeared after his death in 1476. Now, look at the top of King Charles's crown. You have this symbol that looks just like the symbol for the Knights Templar. And apparently, this was called the Black Prince's Ruby, or the Great Imposter. Apparently, the prominent red ruby sitting right above the front diamond band is actually a 170-carat red spinel. Now, the gemstone on Vlad's headdress is believed to have been a ruby, a garnet, or a spinel. No one really knows, because it vanished in 1476. The gemstone on King Charles III's crown was placed on the crown in 1660. It was mistakenly believed to have been a ruby until about 1738, when it was discovered to have been a spinel. The folklore of this stone traveled into modern fiction when Bram Stoker wrote Dracula and heavily drew inspiration from Vlad the Impaler. He embedded this gemstone lore into the narrative. In the novel and early cinematic adaptations, Dracula is intensely associated with rubies and blood red jewels, using their dark, hypnotic allure as a symbol of his supernatural power and immortal life. While researching Dracula, Stoker met and consulted with Armin van Buuren, a prominent Hungarian Jewish writer. He was a traveler and also an academic. Van Buuren provided Stoker with detailed insights and dark folklore about the Carpathian Mountains and Transylvania. You can see off to the right, I have an image up on the screen. In the bottom left corner, this was the stone that Dracula wore in the movie. It has his family crest over this red stone. He wore it as a ring. Off to the right, this is the emblem he wore around his neck. You're welcome to pause and zoom in, but it has a star and a crescent moon coming together, all in the shape of a six-pointed star. Now up on the screen, we have the Mesopotamian fish god known as Dagon. There's a screenshot. And we mentioned in the video that his hat looks like the same hat that the Pope wears. Now look at those red symbols on his wrists. I zoomed in, there it is. They look like the cut of a red gemstone, a ruby, possibly a spinel. Now below that you will see the Moroccan king. And on the Moroccan flag, you have this 5-pointed green star over red. He's wearing a red cap on his head, which looks very similar to Vlad's red hat and also the Shriners' hats. I don't know if you've ever seen them in your community parades. They wear those red hats. And it's interesting because they have this tassel that hangs out of the top. And if you look at Vlad's hat, he has this sort of upwards tassel. So apparently on Vlad's hat, this octagram star or 8-point star symbolizes regeneration, resurrection, and the new creation. The Moroccan flag contains the 5 pillars of Islam and the seal of Solomon in one symbol. Now, the Shriners' hats are said to resemble the Moroccan king's hat, and the Shriners' hat has a 5-pointed star along with a crescent moon that's turned upside down with a sword above and a sphinx's head. And look at these Catholic cardinals. They're also wearing those red caps in that color of cardinal red. Now, if you go to my channel, you go to the homepage, click on the magnifying glass, and you type in the keyword dragon, you will find the video where I talk all about the history of the dragon, the meaning and symbolism in the scriptures, and I definitely bring up this man right here, the father of Vlad the Impaler. His name was Vlad II. He belonged to a secret society of knights called the Order of the Dragon, and it was founded in 1408 to defend Europe. Their symbol was a coiled dragon hanging from a cross. Now, the meaning Dracul, where we get the name Dracula, translates to dragon and later devil in Romanian. Vlad the Impaler was called Dracula, meaning son of the dragon. Real-world historical signet rings associated with his family lineage typically bore this coiled dragon or a raven holding a cross. This symbol is said to represent Christian victory over the dragon. Now, why would a secret society said to be all about Christian victory over the dragon or the devil also contradict themselves by proudly being called the Order of the Dragon, with Vlad the Impaler known as the son of the dragon? In other words, an antichrist. Well, Vlad's political enemies, particularly the Saxon merchants and the Hungarian crown, wanted to frame him as a monster, not a legitimate respected ruler, according to theorists. Destroying dignified lifetime portraits of Vlad was a common way to rewrite history, replacing them with the grotesque woodcuts used in anti-Vlad propaganda pamphlets that we see today. In fact, this is all we see when you Google his name. You find the same portrait, the same drawing or painting where he has this red hat with the emblem on the front. But apparently, none of his personal items or portraits survived after his death. So it makes you wonder who collected all of those items and who destroyed them and why.
That's just the tip of the iceberg, because Vlad the Impaler is your typical noble Celt. He's hazel-eyed, pale-skinned, sensitive to light. He takes his bloodlines back to a tribe produced by Hercules, so very powerful.
These First Nation people have preserved these priest class, right? Just all across the world. This isn't just like localized to white European people. There are people here who practice this type of same old religion, and they call them skinwalkers. That's a name for them. The Jesuits was this like massive assassination team training group that was operating there that started training me. Well, then it was like you needed to learn this spiritual side of assassination and hunting and stalking. And that's where the skinwalkers, they have a different priest class that does that. And so that's what I got put out there for, because they do stuff like slipping between realms. We call them shadow walkers in the industry. Like these are guys that have this means to go between spaces. And so where you can't hear them, you can't see them, you can't detect them. They're not on thermal, but there's certain types of ways that you can detect them. So it's like you have to get kind of raised up into these arts. And these are like, this is why we call it like, this is to me the realm of Azazel. I'm just convinced that this is all Azazel's kingdom in that realm, on that side of it. And people are just branching off of his tree of knowledge of good and evil side of it, you know, and he's ultimately the one that was teaching men these ways of war in that sense of it. But like, just like with what happened with Nebuchadnezzar, man, they cursed him with lycanthropy. Daniel warns him, hey, don't go down that road. You got a dream from the Most High, don't do it. And he did it anyway. He said, the watchers are going to curse you. And that's literally what they did, man. They cursed him and made him a beast. They took him down the lycanthropy road, because that's what they do, man. His hair grew out, his nails grew out. Like he became a different thing that if you and I spotted it on camera, we would say it's a cryptid. We would call these things cryptids because we don't have a proper working knowledge of history and understanding why people called these things these names. But the vampire side of the equation, they tend to be much more human masquerading, whereas you get much more feral production when people start to take this other route of becoming a beast. That's kind of the options that they give people in that world. But I believe a lot of the guys that you see out there or who are experiencing these things, they're loose assets for families. Like these are guard dogs on estates. Like that's literally, there was a training program I had to go to when I was 9 years old, and we'd go up to this farm in Michigan that was in the family, my dad's cousin, and they train all of these police, military, law enforcement, and VIP protection dogs, you know, but then they have other cages that are man-sized cages for other stuff because that gets brought in by the families. Some of these are people that are just beasts, like physically people that are like not like the rest of us, strength-wise, speed-wise, power-wise, intelligence-wise. And then others of them are just unrecognizable as anything related to man. On one side of it, I've seen physical beings that are definitely not like our animals up here come out of these spaces from inside the earth. I've seen in deep underground military bases, and I think a lot of those were experimentation and genetic splicing. I think a lot of that was gene editing stuff that I've seen. But I do believe that some of these things are holdovers from the old days. They're the last of their kinds, and they've been breeding them, right? And I believe that that's the stuff that's prophesied that's going to come back out and cause the hearts of men to stop for fear of looking after these things that are coming up on the earth. You know, that's why everywhere I went throughout my youth, I could go to these tunnels and these caves and call out and I could hear them and they would call back, and it's like, it's a seductive power that draws you back into it.
You could call out to them? Like, was it like a language or a sound or what?
Oh yeah, man. You can learn to call to them. You can go out here in these hills out here and do it. You can still do it tonight on these full moons and stuff. You can start calling out and you'll think you'll hear coyotes at first. And then all of a sudden it's a totally different, it's a different sound that starts to resonate. And then it's a different one that calls off from over here, right? You got to understand some of these guys that you think are just neighbors and stuff or just people, like this is what they keep in their barn.
And the top two classes control the royal bloodlines and the larger family because it's all one larger family, just different branches as it comes down and gets bigger over the years. And so they controlled the kingships. They controlled all of the priests in the religions. They controlled all of the education and only educated themselves. They controlled all the leaders as the officers and generals, commanders of the army. And they also populated the oligarch class. So they controlled all the big business. They were able to hold that system for millennia. This is where the word elite comes from. I would say elim. They consider themselves superior. As the definition of elite through genealogy, through education, through a privileged class. So the best example for the West to understand is the system in Great Britain. And since its rise, 99% of the land was owned by 1% of the population, by the royals. And so when we talk about the 1%, that's the true 1%.
Though they make up only 1% of the population of the earth, their capital enables them to terrorize world exchanges, world opinion, and world politics. The House of Warburg follows the same tactic as do other Jewish banking families. By the beginning of the 20th century, the Jews are sitting at all junctions of the world's money market. They're an international power.
And that's why they have a war against the middle class today. They want to reassert that they introduced before the flood originally and then reintroduced again after the flood.
The Reynolds family on my father's side, they're all from the East Coast out here, and they're a dynastic family. Like my great-grandfather, a man named Don Potter Reynolds, was the architect, the head of engineering for the president, as the president of the American Society of Civil Engineering back in the 80s. And he's the one who put the new torch in the Luciferian hand of the Statue of Liberty of Columbia.
Oh, it's always 13 families.
Collins family, whom are also called the Cohens, the Jewish Cohens, the priests, the Levites, the Cohens, the Collins, the Colon, becomes Columbia, District of Columbia, the Knights of Columbus, Columbia Pictures, British Columbia, Columbia in South America, and the Collins family still runs America. They started the communist movement in the 40s with Stalin from Wall Street. That was all organized by the Collins family, of course. The Collins and the Orsini, the Maxima family. Maxima means they're on top.
Yeah. And so he's a master Mason Luciferian in that way. And he was so much of the shot caller for the family at that time, especially when I came into being. And but my dad left that thing and moved out to the Southwest and started a different empire. And so a lot of how it works in the families is you got two main approaches. If you've got unlimited access to wealth, power, like really, I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about power, like unlimited raw power, where a phone call, the phone book is far more powerful than the bank account because it's who can open doors to power anywhere else in the entire world. And that's where everything was. So you can leave with nothing, but then you can go build. And if you need the phone book, there's a price to be paid. And the price to be paid is generally one of your children. This is like the reality. It seems bizarre to some, but a child is generally a chosen child out of the family is given over as an offering to the family. And they're the ones who's going to go through this left-hand path. They're going to experience the desecration of their soul, their identity, and they're going to become an agent for the family that is owned completely. And there's like a legal trustee that is given over to it. There's a board of directors that sits over it. Like these are real legal confines for how the wealth is distributed out there. And so in order to build your empire, you got to be able to go prove yourself. And that's what he ended up doing out in the Southwest. And he moved to Arizona, an area called Flagstaff, Arizona. And where I was born, that is a place that's a high place, Mount Humphreys. It's a volcanic peaks that sit there. And the top of it is where the Hopi Indian and a lot of people had gathered forever to commune with the fallen. They believed that the sons of the sky would come down every season at the winter solstice, and they would abide from the winter solstice to the summer solstice there. And so this was a place where they would give their daughters over to them. This is Hopi mythology, like 101, and they would make these Kachina dolls, which were an effigy of the what I would say is a watcher angel that would come, and the daughter would be given to him, and she would place that over her bed throughout her life, and that's her familiar spirit, right? That's where I was born into. And the people that still practice that old religion, that's the way I refer to it, they still do this. And they still take their children up there to give them over to them on these high days. And so I was born into that, and I was born through that seed line and into that ritual magic world. And
do these people know that they're advancing a system that has been prophesied?
Well, and it depends on the individual. Is Trump completely informed on end-time prophecy? I don't know that. He says he's a Christian, but that doesn't mean he knows prophecy. But his terms aren't all that good at times either. And I'm thinking that he's not against the New World Order. He just wants a larger role for the U.S. But that plays into advancing the New World Order. The Golden Age is a polytheist term for the days of Noah,
which is prophesied to come back as the days of Noah cycle back.
Yeah, and Atlantis had 10 kings. That was the center of a universal religion. It was also trying to spread, and the center of technology for the antediluvian age. This is the new Atlantis that the polytheists talk about bringing about in the end time, which is akin to the 10 kings of Daniel and toes of Daniel 2. Daniel 7 also includes the horns. So we're going to have 10 empires in the end time running by 10 Antichrist-like beings, where one horn rises amongst them, between them, after it comes to power to become Antichrist. Yeah, it's concerning when he's talking about reintroducing that new golden age. He may be hearkening back to the Gilded Age as a golden age, but it's the terminology that I find a bit disturbing.
These 10 kings, these 10 things, isn't that already published research on like the globalist agenda?
Sure, they've divided the Club of Rome when it was created to get the New World Order moving faster because they were unhappy with the pace. It was created in the late 60s, and they divided the world into 10 groups of nations.
Exactly.
Very similar to what the UN uses. So the Europeans have their model of how they would kind of like it to play out. And so we need to understand that this is in place today. So
it is the capital of the New World Order. It's Denver. The Front Range of Colorado is 100% the place where the capital has been built and the infrastructure was laid. And so I got put into the military side of the projects there when I was a young teen. And that's where NORAD Space Command and all of this underground facility from the United States Air Force Academy. And that's where I went into the military side of the equation. And that's where I stayed for quite a few years.
We should understand the world behind the geopolitics of the rivalries of the bloodline, because there can only be one bloodline that's going to become Antichrist. So one bloodline in their belief system is going to rule the world. They all want to get there, but they want to be that bloodline.
I think Nathan Reynolds was talking about like all these families are competing who could be a vessel for that Antichrist spirit. It's happening over here. It's happening in China, no doubt. Russia, Europe. I mean, anywhere you want to go.
And I'm told they hold in Europe 3 Antichrists ready to go at any one time. One presumes from different bloodlines, but they do want to advance that. And why do they want to get there? They want the rendezvous with God. They want the end time war because they believe they're going to win. They have end time prophecy themselves. We get a glimpse at some of it through people like Alice Bailey, but the most famous would be Nostradamus, who was Rosicrucian, and although opaque, because of all the allegory that's written into it for only adepts to understand, they have an end time scenario that they think that they win in. The fallen angels continue to tell their offspring, their descendants of their offspring, that they can still win. And they have to play this out. And there's a place for them in the future time when they renew the earth. They just want to do it before the ordained time if they can.
Now, knowledge leads to truth, and truth sets you free. While the world focuses on everything that's wrong, we're going to end part 1 on everything that's right with some powerful truth.
That maybe just because I have this seed line in me, that maybe just because I'm a progenitor of the offspring of the fallen, that it doesn't mean that I'm not able to be redeemed, because no matter what, by blood or by belief, I believe that we have a Messiah that overcame and we can overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the words of our testimony, and not living our lives when faced with death. And it was that powerful encounter with the Almighty, with the true judge of all the earth, who I can make an appeal to, who can give me a new bloodline, you know, and that's what he offers to everyone.
I bear testimony of the resurrected, living Jesus Christ. He is the head of this, his church. President Dallin H. Oaks is called by him to preside over the church on the earth and to be the Lord's prophetic spokesman to the world.
My brothers and sisters, as followers of Christ, let us follow him by foregoing contention and by using the language and methods of peacemakers.
I know that he is. This is his true church, the Church of Jesus Christ.
The Lord our God is mighty. He will save, and he will rejoice over us. He and only he can consider every factor that shapes who we are: our genetics, intellectual abilities, traditions, experiences, mental and emotional conditions, and every other circumstance that affects who we are. He and only he will eventually judge us according to our works, according to the desire of our hearts. Because of Jesus Christ, all that's unfair in life can and will be made right. He'll consecrate our afflictions for our gain. He'll sanctify to us our deepest distress. He'll fill with sweet a bitter cup. He will dependably and consistently make us whole. If we let him, we'll suffer no manner of afflictions save it's swallowed up in the joy of Christ.
There can be no neutrality. We are or we are not on the side of the Lord.
May we stand by Jesus Christ at all times and in all things and in all places that we may be in, even until death. For surely that is how he stood by us.
We are living witnesses unless we are blinded by our own complacency and the craftiness of evil men. As watchmen on the Tower of Zion, it is our obligation and right as leaders to speak out against current evils, evils that strike at the very foundation of all we hold dear as the true Church of Christ and as members of Christian nations.
Brothers and sisters, as the Book of Mormon teaches, this life is the time for men to prepare to meet God. Prepare yourselves for the great day of the Lord.
The Book of Mormon title page reads that one of its purposes is for the convincing of the Jew and Gentile that Jesus is the Christ. With the Restoration and Book of Mormon, the concept of gathering Israel has greatly expanded. Those who accept the gospel of Jesus Christ, regardless of lineage, become part of gathered Israel. With that gathering and the numerous temples built and announced, we are in a unique position to gather Israel on both sides of the veil as never before under the Father's plan. Any person, therefore, who has accepted the restored gospel and who now seeks to worship the Lord in his own tongue and with the saints in the nations where he lives, has complied with the law of the gathering of Israel and is heir to all of the blessings promised to saints in these last days. This gathering shall continue until the righteous are assembled in the congregation of the saints in the nations of the world.
The current commandment is not to gather to one place, but to gather in stakes in our own homelands. There the faithful can enjoy the full blessings of eternity in a house of the Lord. There, in their own homelands, they can obey the Lord's command to enlarge the borders of his people and strengthen her stakes. In this way, the stakes of Zion are for a defense and for a refuge from the storm and from wrath, when it shall be poured out without measure upon the whole earth.
If you are serious about helping to gather Israel and about building relationships that will last throughout the eternities, now is the time to lay aside bitterness. Now is the time to bury your weapons of war.
Brothers and sisters, now is the time for you and for me
to prepare for the second coming of our Lord and Savior, Jesus the Christ.
The movies and magazines and television that shape our attitudes are filled with stories or images that portray the children of God as predatory beasts, or at best as trivial creations pursuing little more than personal pleasure. And too many of us accept this as entertainment.
The church is founded on eternal truth. We do not compromise principle. We do not surrender our standards regardless of current trends or pressures. Our allegiance to truth as a church is unwavering. Speaking out against immoral or unjust actions has been the burden of prophets and disciples of God from time immemorial.
The men and women who made epic sacrifices to combat evil regimes in the past were shaped by values that are disappearing from our public teaching. The good, the true, and the beautiful are being replaced by the no good, the whatever, and the valueless fodder of personal whim. An increasing number of opinion leaders and followers deny the existence of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and revere only the gods of secularism. Many in positions of power and influence deny the right and wrong defined by divine decree. Even among those who profess to believe in right and wrong, there are them that call evil good and good evil. The people of God have always been people of covenant. Are we following the Lord's command? Stand ye in holy places and be not moved until the day of the Lord come, for behold, it cometh quickly.
The complexities and challenges leave many people feeling overwhelmed and exhausted. Each person who makes covenants in baptismal fonts, in temples, and keeps them has increased access to the power of Jesus Christ. The reward for keeping covenants with God is heavenly power, power that strengthens us to withstand our trials, temptations, and heartaches better. Those who live the higher laws of Jesus Christ have access to His higher power. In the world ye shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. Dear brothers and sisters, my message to you today is that because Jesus Christ overcame this fallen world, and because He atoned for each of us, you too can overcome this sin-saturated, self-centered, and often exhausting world.
God help us to repent of our evil ways and humble ourselves before the offended power. There is great safety in a nation on its knees.
You can overcome the spiritually and emotionally exhausting plagues of the world, including arrogance, pride, anger, immorality, hatred, greed, jealousy, and fear.
Our missionaries seek to be peacemakers. They preach repentance from personal corruption, greed, and oppression, because only by individual reformation can an entire society eventually rise among such evils. By inviting all to repent and come unto Christ, our missionaries are working for peace by helping individual men and women come unto Christ and experience a mighty change of heart and behavior.
Despite the distractions and distortions that swirl around us, you can find true rest, meaning relief and peace, even amid your most vexing problems.
In our concentration upon materialism and material acquisitions, are we forgetting the spiritual basis upon which our prosperity, security, and freedom rest?
While the world insists that power, possessions, popularity, and pleasures of the flesh bring happiness, they do not. They cannot. What they do produce is nothing but a hollow substitute for the blessed and happy state of those who keep the commandments of God.
There shall come in the last days scoffers, walking after their own lusts and saying, "Where is the promise of his coming?" Peter reminds us that the Lord is not slack, and that if there's any seeming delay in his return, it is because of his long-suffering mercy in giving us more time to repent before the great and dreadful day of the Lord.
The truth is that it is much more exhausting to seek happiness where you can never find it. However, when you yoke yourself to Jesus Christ, He and He alone does have the power to lift you above the pull of this world. I bless you to be able to discern truth from error. I bless you to care more about the things of God than the things of this world.
In the world, the Savior said, "Ye shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer. Keep a brightness of hope. I have overcome the world."
Because Jesus Christ overcame this world, you can too.
In times as serious as these, we must not permit fear of criticism to keep us from doing our duty, even at the risk of our counsel being tabbed as political, as government becomes more and more entwined in our daily lives. In the crisis through which we are now passing, we have been fully warned. This has brought forth some criticism. There are some of us who do not want to hear the message. It embarrasses us. The things which are threatening our lives, our welfare, our freedoms, are the very things some of us have been condoning. Many do not want to be disturbed as they continue to enjoy their comfortable complacency. The United States of America has been great because it has been free. It has been free because it has trusted in God and was founded upon the principles of freedom set forth in the Word of God. A group of well-known historians has summarized those conditions leading to the downfall of Rome in these words. Rome had known a pioneer beginning, not unlike our own pioneer heritage, and then entered into 2 centuries of greatness, reaching its pinnacle in the second of those centuries, going into the decline and collapse in the third. Yet the sins of decay were becoming apparent in the latter years of the 2nd century. And then finally all these forces overcame the energy and ambition of the middle class. Rome fell. We are now approaching the end of our 2nd century. Could the same reasons that destroyed Rome destroy America and possibly other countries of the free world? The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints stands firm in support of great spiritual and moral principles which have been the basic traditions of the free world.
Under President Nelson's inspired leadership, the Lord has accelerated and will continue to accelerate the building of temples across the world. This will allow all of God's children the opportunity to receive the ordinances of salvation and exaltation, and to make and keep sacred covenants, that every covenant with God is an opportunity to draw closer to Him, which will then create a desire in your heart to keep temple covenants.
I remember covenants made in the house of the Lord that connect me to Jesus Christ in such a personal and intimate way. I felt of the Savior's love, His mercy, and of His assurance that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is His kingdom upon the earth and is necessary to prepare us for His second coming. Because I remembered, I again was able to recognize the Holy Ghost and to understand more fully that Jesus is the Christ and I am His disciple.
We have been promised, because of our covenant with God, He will never tire in His efforts to help us, and we will never exhaust His merciful patience with us.
In times of difficulty, we choose to trust the Lord in faith. We quietly pray, "Not my will, but thine be done." We feel the Lord's approval for our meek willingness, and we await the promised peace the Lord will send in His chosen timing.
But the day of the Lord will come, Peter forcefully declares. in the which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. The earth and also the works that are therein shall be burned up.
We will, on the day of judgment, stand before the Savior, face to face. It will be a time of great joy for those in this life who have drawn close to Him in His service.
Since we know that the Lord will come and establish a new earth where righteousness prevails, Peter asks, "What manner of persons ought ye to be?" He counsels that we should be preparing diligently now, so that when the Lord comes, He will find us, quote, "in peace, without spot, and blameless," unquote, leading lives of holiness.
In coming days, we will see the greatest manifestations of the Savior's power that the world has ever seen. Between now and the time He returns with power and great glory, He will bestow countless privileges, blessings, and miracles upon the faithful. Nonetheless, we are presently living in what surely is a most complicated time in the history of the world.
My beloved brothers and sisters, my dear young friends, there will be likely difficulties for each of us in the days ahead.
But we do know that when the game finally ends, our team wins. We will continue to go forward till the purposes of God shall be accomplished and the great Jehovah shall say, "The work is done."
Well, there's so much more that your Father in heaven wants you to know, as Elder Neil A. Maxwell taught. To those who have eyes to see and ears to hear, it is clear that the Father and the Son are giving away the secrets of the universe. I urge you to stretch beyond your current spiritual ability to receive personal revelation. For the Lord has promised that if thou shalt seek, thou shalt receive revelation upon revelation, knowledge upon knowledge, that thou mayest know the mysteries and peaceable things, that which bringeth joy, that which bringeth life eternal.
And it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow unto it. Surely the monumental events that will occur during the next 10 years constitute one manifestation. This prophecy of Isaiah is being fulfilled. Contemplate the unprecedented number of temple open houses and dedications that are planned to take place over the next decade. Even the potential of 164 temples and counting. Imagine tens of millions of you and your friends walking through a house of the Lord. The symbolic center of these events will be the rededication of the Salt Lake Temple and the activities associated with it. These will certainly be days never to be forgotten. To those who have the name of the Savior upon their lips and the Holy Spirit in their souls, to those who embark upon this grand and glorious pilgrimage, you will discover and experience bounteous celestial blessings and receive a witness that God hears you, knows you, and loves you. You will experience days never to be forgotten. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Hi, I'm Lindsey Reach, the creator of Hydro Heal, a product that's been changing dry skin for almost 2 decades. I created Hydro Heal back in 2008 as a solution for my own dry feet. Countless pedicures and dermatologist visits weren't making a difference. And who has the time or energy for this method? Word on the street spread, and Hydro Heal gained the attention of Shark Tank investors and venture capitalists, launching it on a nationwide TV campaign, gaining interest and attention from celebrities on live TV. See it to believe it demos and try before you buy? Put Hydro Heal in the spotlight, selling out of product at every show. After my feet were transformed, I decided to test it on eczema, dry lips and hands, athlete's foot, and cradle cap. And the results were incredible. Brand new skin in just 7 days. But it gets even better. HydroHeal was also tested on a recovering hospital patient with an ongoing leg wound that would not close. After 3 days, this was the result. A wound that closed, healthy skin, and doctors were amazed. So how does HydroHeal work? It's a solid ointment made from natural ingredients that turns into a liquid on contact with your skin, seeping down into deep cracks, while acting like a bandage, creating an invisible barrier on the surface, protecting your skin from outside elements, allowing it to naturally repair from the inside out. Start feeling more comfortable in your skin today, because everyone should love their skin. Click down below for a special offer or visit hydroheal.com.